Story 1. This story is titled, My Wife Called Me, Just a Roommate. So I made her pay like one, and now she is begging. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Alright, so I, 30 male, need to get this off my chest because things have gone completely sideways with my wife Melissa, 28 female. We've been married for 3 years, but together for almost 6. When we first met, it was at this bar through mutual friends. She wasn't like supermodel hot or anything, but definitely pretty, and had this really confident vibe that I was into right away. We hit it off, exchanged numbers, and started dating a couple weeks later. The first few years were honestly pretty awesome. We did all that couple stuff. Weekend trips, meeting each other's families. Her parents were kinda standoffish, but whatever. Moving in together after a year. I proposed on our 2-year anniversary, and we got married about 8 months later. Nothing fancy, just family and close friends. I bought a house about 6 months before the wedding. My name's on everything since I paid the down payment from money I saved up working my ass off at my job. So for the first year of marriage, things were good. We'd both come home from work, cook dinner together, watch shows, normal stuff. We talked about maybe having kids in a few years. But looking back, I can see things started changing maybe around year 2 of our marriage. Melissa started getting more into her career. She works in marketing. Started staying late at work more. Going to these networking events. Gradually spending less time at home. I was supportive. Figured it was good for her career and all that. I picked up more of the household stuff so she could focus on work. Started paying most of the bills too since she said she wanted to build her career before focusing on money. It was little stuff at first. She'd cancel our date nights last minute because of work. She'd be on her phone constantly even when we were supposed to be spending time together. If I brought it up, she'd get defensive and say I wasn't being supportive of her career. So I backed off. We stopped doing things together on weekends. She was either too tired from work or suddenly had these brunches and shopping trips with her friends that I wasn't invited to. Started feeling like we were just existing in the same space but not really connecting anymore. Anyway, last couple of months she told me her friend group is doing this dinner thing at this new restaurant downtown and she wants me to come. I was honestly surprised she even asked me. It had been months since she included me in anything with her friends. I wasn't super excited about it. Her friends are mostly these marketing PR types who just talk about work drama and gossip about people I don't know, but figured maybe this was her trying to include me more. So we went to this dinner. There's like 8 people total. Melissa, me, and 6 of her friends. The restaurant is packed and loud, and we end up at this long table. I'm like 3 seats away from Melissa, sandwiched between her friend Taylor, who's talking to someone else the whole time, and some guy I never met before who's on his phone. I'm basically just sitting there nursing my soda, not really part of any conversation. Nobody's talking to me or even acknowledging I exist. Pretty normal for these things, honestly. I'm used to being the invisible husband at this point. I'm kind of zoning out, thinking about this project at work I need to finish, when I hear Melissa's friend Caitlin ask, "So how's married life treating you these days?" The way she said it was weird, like there was something behind the question. That's when I tuned in to what Melissa was saying. And guys, I swear, it felt like someone punched me in the stomach. Melissa laughed, not like a happy laugh, but this dismissive snort, and says, "Oh please, he's just my roommate at this point. Just my roommate." I literally froze with my beer halfway to my mouth. I mean, who says that about their husband? And the way she said it wasn't joking at all. It was like she was stating some obvious fact that everyone already knew. She even glanced at me when she said, and noticed that I was paying attention, but didn't give a shit. What's worse is how her friends reacted. They all laughed and nodded like this was completely normal. One of them even said, "Aren't all husbands just glorified roommates eventually?" And they all cracked up even more. All except this one girl, Olivia. She's newer to their friend group. I've only met her a couple times. She didn't laugh and actually glanced over at me with this look like she felt bad for me. At least someone in this group has a soul, I guess. I don't even remember the rest of the dinner conversation. My brain was just stuck on replay hearing my wife call me her roommate over and over. I kept eating and drinking on autopilot, not saying anything, just trying to process what just happened. The thing is, she didn't even look at me when she said it. Didn't check if I heard. Didn't care. Like I wasn't even a factor in her life worth considering. On the drive home, Melissa was chatting about random stuff, acting completely normal while I'm sitting there feeling like my whole marriage just got nuked. I barely responded. Just one-word answers and nods. When we got home, flopped down on the couch scrolling through Instagram like nothing happened. Like she hadn't just completely disrespected our entire relationship in front of all her friends. I stood there watching her for a minute, waiting to see if she'd say anything. Acknowledge what she said. Apologize? Anything. But nope, nothing. That's when it hit me. Maybe this wasn't just a random comment. Maybe this is actually how she sees me. Just some guy who lives in the same house and pays the bills. Not her husband, not her partner. Just her roommate. I couldn't hold it in anymore. So, am I really just your roommate now? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual, even though I felt anything but. Melissa looked up from her phone, annoyed at being interrupted. What are you talking about? At dinner. You told your friends I'm just your roommate at this point. She rolled her eyes and went back to scrolling. Oh my god, it was just a joke. Don't be so sensitive. That's just how we talk sometimes. Didn't sound like a joke, I said. Well, it was, she snapped. You're seriously overreacting. Can we not do this right now? I'm tired. And that was it. No apology, no explanation, not even acknowledging how it might have hurt me. Just dismissing my feelings and making it seem like I was the problem for being upset. I didn't want to escalate things because I was still trying to wrap my head around everything. Plus, I wanted to think about how to approach this. But one thing was clear. Something in our relationship was seriously wrong, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next morning, I went through my normal routine on autopilot. Melissa was rushing around like usual, barely acknowledging me except to ask if I'd seen her phone charger. Just another normal day for her. As I was driving to work, I kept replaying that moment at dinner over and over in my head. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I've been busting my ass for years to build a life with this woman. I bought the house we live in. I pay most of the bills. I've been supporting her career by taking on more household responsibilities. I've been the one making all the effort in our relationship while she's been, what? Going out with friends? Working late? Barely paying attention to me? And this is how she sees me. Just some dude who happens to live in the same house? By the time I got to work, I'd made a decision. If Melissa wants a roommate instead of a husband, that's exactly what she's going to get. I spent my lunch break setting up a new bank account and transferring most of our money from our joint account into it. I left enough to cover my half of the bills for the month. Not a penny more. I used to pay like 80% of everything because I make more, but roommates split bills 50-50, right? When I got home that evening, I didn't ask Melissa about her day like I usually do. I didn't tell her about mine. I just said, hey, and went to the spare room where I've got my gaming set up. Usually I'd wait for her to finish work and we'd decide on dinner together, but not tonight. I ordered a pizza just for myself. When it came, I grabbed a couple slices and went back to my game. Melissa came in looking confused. Did you order pizza? Where's mine? I shrugged, not looking away from my screen. Oh, I just ordered for myself. Figured you'd get something if you were hungry. She stood there for a second, like she was waiting for more of an explanation. When I didn't say anything else, she just went, okay, and left the room. I heard her in the kitchen a few minutes later making herself something. That was the start of what I now think of as Operation Roommate. Over the next couple weeks, I systematically changed how I interacted with Melissa. I stopped texting her during the day to check in. I stopped picking up groceries for her. I stopped doing her laundry with mine. I stopped asking if she needed anything when I went to the store. I stopped telling her when I was going out or when I'd be home or making dinner for both of us. Basically, I stopped doing all the husband things and started acting like we were just two people sharing a living space, like roommates. At first, Melissa didn't really seem to notice. Or if she did, she didn't say anything. She was still going out a lot, still working late, still on her phone constantly when she was home. But after about a week, things started to change. She came home one night and opened the fridge, then turned to me with this annoyed look. There's like no food in here. Didn't you go grocery shopping? I didn't look up from my laptop. Yeah, I got my stuff. It's on the left side of the fridge. Your stuff? What about the rest of the groceries? I just bought what I needed, I said, still not looking at her. Figured you'd get whatever you want for yourself. She made this frustrated noise. Since when do we buy separate groceries? I finally looked up at her. I don't know, just trying something different. Is that a problem? She stared at me for a second, then just muttered, whatever, and ordered takeout for herself. The real drama started about 2 weeks into Operation Roommate. Melissa texted me during the day saying she was buying these expensive shoes she'd been wanting, and her card got declined. She called me right after, sounding pissed. Why is there only $700 in our joint account? She demanded. That's your half of the bills for this month, I said calmly. My half? What are you talking about? And where's the rest of our money? I set up my own account. That's my money from my job. The joint account is just for bills now. There was a long pause before she spoke again. You moved our money without telling me? What the hell, Jake? Not our money, my money, from my paycheck. You've got your own job and your own money, but we've always shared finances. You can't just change that without talking to me. I almost laughed. Yeah, and I thought we were husband and wife, not roommates, but apparently things change. What are you talking about? She sounded genuinely confused. Nothing. Look, I put your half of the bills in the joint account. You need to pay that by the end of the month. The rest of your money is yours to do whatever you want with, just like mine is mine. She started saying something else, but I told her I had a meeting and hung up. When Melissa got home that night, she was fuming. She stormed into the living room where I was watching TV and stood right in front of me. We need to talk about what the hell is going on with you, she said, arms crossed. I muted the TV. What's up? Don't what's up me. You know what's up. The money. The groceries. The way you've been acting. What's your problem? I shrugged. No problem. Just making some changes. Without talking to me? That's not how marriages work. And there it was. My opening. I looked her straight in the eyes. Oh, so we're in a marriage? That's weird because I distinctly remember you telling your friends that I'm just your roommate at this point. I'm just trying to live up to your expectations. Her face went through like 5 different expressions in 2 seconds. It was just a fucking joke. I didn't mean anything by it. Didn't sound like a joke to me, or to your friends based on how they all nodded along. Sounded pretty serious, actually. It was just girl talk. You're being way too sensitive about this. Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally seeing things clearly. You've been treating me like a roommate for months, barely talking to me, always on your phone, going out all the time without me. I'm just finally returning the favor. Melissa's eyes narrowed. So this is what? Payback? Real mature. Number just adjusting to our actual relationship status. Roommates don't share finances. They don't do each other's grocery shopping or laundry. They don't check in during the day. They live separate lives under the same roof. Isn't that what we're doing now? She stared at me, opening and closing her mouth like she couldn't decide what to say. Finally, she just threw up her hands and walked out of the room, muttering about how ridiculous I was being. But I noticed something interesting over the next few days. Melissa started trying harder. She texted me during the day. She suggested we order dinner together. She asked about my day. Too little, too late in my opinion, but interesting. What she didn't know was that Operation Roommate was just getting started, and I was about to take it to the next level. So about 3 weeks into my roommate routine with Melissa, something unexpected happened. I was grabbing coffee before work at this place near my office when I heard someone call my name. I turned around and saw Olivia, that friend of Melissa's who actually looked uncomfortable when Melissa called me her roommate at dinner. Hey Jake, right? She said, walking over. Melissa's husband? I nodded. Yeah. Hey, Olivia? She smiled, looking surprised I remembered her name. Good memory. I didn't know you came here. Every morning, their coffee's better than the office stuff. There was this awkward pause. I could tell she wanted to say something, but wasn't sure if she should. Listen, she finally said. I've been wanting to reach out. That dinner a few weeks ago, what Melissa said wasn't cool. I just wanted you to know not everyone thought it was funny. I was kind of shocked someone was actually acknowledging it. Thanks. Appreciate that. Are you guys okay? I mean, not that it's my business. I shrugged. We're figuring things out. No way was I dumping my marriage problems on someone I barely knew, even if she seemed nice. Olivia nodded. Well, I hope things work out. For what it's worth, I think you seem like a gentleman. That made me smile for the first time in weeks. Thanks, Olivia. We ended up sitting together for like 15 minutes talking. Turned out she's actually pretty cool. Works as a physical therapist. Moved to the city about 6 months ago. Met Melissa's group through a mutual friend. She was easy to talk to, and it felt good having an actual conversation where someone was interested in what I had to say. Before we left, she hesitated, then said, Look, I know this might be weird, but if you ever need someone to talk to, here's my number. She scribbled it on a napkin and handed it to me. I honestly felt it was a bit weird, like crossing a line. I didn't know what exactly was her intention, but I thought I could use some help, and it also seemed like she was just being nice. Thanks, I said, putting it in my pocket. I might take you up on that. A couple days later, I was having a particularly frustrating day. Melissa had been increasingly pissy about the roommate situation, complaining about having to contribute more to bills and how I was being childish. Then I found out someone had used our joint credit card, which I thought was canceled but apparently wasn't, to buy a $500 purse. 3 guesses who. I was sitting in my car in the office parking lot just fuming when I remembered Olivia's number. I thought of giving her a shot. Maybe she knows what Olivia is up to. So I texted her, "Hey, it's Jake. Is that offer to talk still open?" She responded almost immediately, "Absolutely. Everything okay?" We ended up meeting for coffee after work. I didn't plan to dump everything on her, but somehow, looking into her big warm eyes, it all came pouring out. The roommate comment, how Melissa had been distant for months, how I'd started Operation Roommate, all of it. Olivia just listened, not judging, occasionally asking questions. When I finished, she sighed. "I don't know Melissa super well, but from what I've seen in the group, she talks about you differently when you're not there." My stomach dropped. "How so?" Olivia looked uncomfortable. "She complains a lot. Says you're boring, that she feels stuck." Wow. I didn't know what else to say. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said anything." "No, I appreciate the honesty. Seriously." Before we left, she touched my arm. "Jake, you deserve someone who's proud to be with you, not someone who treats you like an inconvenience." That hit me hard. Because she was right. It was the first time I actually saw Olivia. Not just as Melissa's friend, not just as someone who happened to be around, but as someone who noticed me, who saw the cracks before I even admitted they were there. We started texting after that. Just casual stuff, how the day went, little annoyances, inside jokes, but it felt different. Like, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just talking to fill dead air. Someone actually wanted to hear what I had to say. No sighs, no eye rolls. Just a real conversation with someone who actually gave a damn. And man, I didn't realize how much I missed that until I had it again. Melissa didn't even notice, of course. She was too wrapped up in her own world, still going out several nights a week with friends from work and coming home late smelling like cologne that definitely wasn't mine. I wasn't stupid. I knew where this was headed. But I needed proof before I made my next move. Now let me get this clear. I'm not normally the suspicious type. Really, I'm not. Been cheated on before in college and promised myself I wouldn't be that paranoid boyfriend checking phones and stuff. But there's a difference between being paranoid and just connecting obvious dots. Melissa was showing all the classic signs. Staying out late, being secretive with her phone, sudden new work friends I never met, getting all dressed up for office meetings, plus that cologne smell. I mean, come on. I needed to know for sure, though. First, I tried the direct approach. "So who's this new work friend you've been hanging out with so much?" I asked casually one morning. Melissa barely looked up from her phone. "What? Oh, just people from the marketing team. No one interesting. Seems like you're with them a lot lately." She rolled her eyes. "What? Are you monitoring my schedule now? I thought we were just roommates." She made air quotes with her fingers. "Just making conversation," I said, walking away. Clearly, the direct approach wasn't going to work, so I made a decision that some people might judge me for. But whatever. I bought an AirTag. If you don't know what that is, it's this little tracking device Apple makes. You're supposed to use it for finding your keys or luggage, but people use them for other stuff too. I waited for a morning when Melissa was still sleeping. Her car keys were on the counter like always. I quickly took them, slipped the AirTag into this little pocket in her car's center console where she keeps spare change and receipts, and put the keys back. The whole thing took maybe 30 seconds. That same day, Melissa texted saying she'd be working late again and not to wait up. Perfect timing to test my new setup. Around 6 p.m., I opened the Find My app on my phone and checked the AirTag location. It showed her car was on the move. I watched as she drove, not toward her office downtown, but toward the fancy apartment complex on the north side of the city. Her car stopped there at 6:45 p.m. My heart was pounding. Part of me hoped there was some innocent explanation. Maybe a friend lived there. Maybe there really was a work thing there. But deep down, I knew. For the next 3 days, I tracked her movements. The pattern was obvious. Tuesday. Told me she was having dinner with coworkers. Car went to the same apartment complex from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. Thursday. Said she had a client meeting. Car at the apartment complex from 6:30 p.m. to almost midnight. I texted Olivia during all this, not telling her what I was doing exactly, just venting about Melissa's obvious lies. Olivia was supportive but cautious. "Are you sure you want to know?" She texted. "Sometimes finding out just makes things more painful." "I need to know," I replied. "I'm tired of being played for a fool." I decided to take the final step. The next Tuesday, when Melissa said she had another late meeting, I told her I was going to grab drinks with some guys from work and wouldn't be home until late. Total lie, obviously. Instead, I parked down the street from the apartment complex and waited. Sure enough, at 6:30 p.m., Melissa's car pulled in. I watched as she parked, checked her makeup in the mirror, then got out and walked to one of the buildings. She typed a code at the door and went inside. I sat there for maybe 15 minutes, debating what to do next. Part of me wanted to storm in there, Catch them in the act. Make a huge scene. But what would that accomplish? More drama? No thanks. I just took pictures of her car in the lot and the building she entered. Then I took a deep breath and drove home. I now had all the proof I needed. My wife was cheating on me. The question now was, what was I going to do about it? I called Olivia on the drive home. When she answered, I just said, "You were right about everything." "Oh, Jake," she said softly. "I'm so sorry. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but I'm done being just her roommate." That night, I slept in the spare room. Melissa didn't come home until after midnight. She didn't even notice I wasn't in our bed. The next day, I called in sick to work. No way I could focus on spreadsheets and meetings while my marriage was imploding. I spent the morning researching divorce lawyers and found one with good reviews who could see me that afternoon. I laid everything out for him. The roommate comment, the cheating, the house situation, our finances. "So what am I looking at here?" I asked after explaining everything. He leaned back in his chair. "Well, you're in a pretty good position, legally speaking. The house is in your name and you owned it before marriage, so that's likely protected. No kids makes things simpler. Virginia isn't a pure no-fault state, so her adultery could work in your favor. The main question is how contentious you want this to be." I thought about it. "I don't want drama. I just want out." "Smart man. The ones who want revenge end up paying me a lot more money." He gave me this knowing smile. "Let's draft the paperwork. In the meantime, document everything. Her absences, evidence of the affair, financial records, and don't tell her you're filing until we're ready." I paid his retainer and left feeling lighter somehow, like I was finally taking control of the situation. When I got home, I had a text from Olivia asking how I was doing. I suggested meeting for coffee, and she agreed. We met at this quiet little place a few towns over, where Melissa's friends wouldn't see us. She looked worried when she saw me. "You look exhausted," she said. "Haven't been sleeping much?" I stirred my coffee absently. "I met with a divorce lawyer today." Her eyes widened. "Wow, that was fast." Once I knew for sure about the cheating, it wasn't a hard decision. "Our marriage has been dead for months," she nodded. "I get it, but it's still a big step." Olivia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Just a quick, supportive gesture, but it felt more genuine than any touch I'd had from Melissa in months. "What happens now?" she asked. "Lawyers preparing the papers. I'm gathering evidence. Then I serve her and ask her to move out. She's not going to like that." I shrugged. Tough. She should have thought about that before cheating on me. We talked for almost 2 hours. Not just about the divorce, but about everything. Our jobs, families, favorite movies, travel stories. It was so easy talking to Olivia. No feeling judged, just two people genuinely interested in what the other had to say. When we finally said goodbye, she hugged me. "You're gonna be okay, Jake? Better than okay?" For the first time in weeks, I actually believed that. Over the next few days, I kept gathering evidence. Took screenshots of our bank statements showing I paid for everything. Downloaded records of Melissa's credit card charges, fancy restaurants I never went to, hotel charges on nights she was supposedly with friends. Backed up the AirTag location history. Put it all in a folder for Richard. Meanwhile, Melissa was completely oblivious. She kept up her routine of coming home late, barely talking to me, and spending weekends out with friends. The audacity of it all just strengthened my resolve. At that point, Olivia and I texted daily. Nothing inappropriate, I wasn't going to be a cheater, but we were definitely getting closer. She told me about her past relationships, her difficult family. I opened up about stuff I hadn't told anyone in years. She made me laugh when I didn't think I could. I thought it was nice having someone supportive through all this shit. A week after seeing the lawyer, the divorce papers were ready. The lawyer advised serving Melissa when she wasn't expecting it, preferably with a witness present. "You want someone there who can verify how it went down," he explained, "especially if she gets emotional or makes threats." Without thinking twice, I asked Olivia if she'd be my witness. She agreed immediately. "I'll be there," she texted. "Whatever you need." I set the date for Friday night, when I knew Melissa would be home. Time to end this farce of a marriage once and for all. Friday came faster than I expected. I spent the morning going over the plan with the lawyer, making sure I knew exactly what to say and how to handle different scenarios. He gave me the divorce papers in a manila envelope that felt way too light for something so serious. Olivia texted me throughout the day with encouraging messages. "You can do this. Stay strong. I'll be there." Simple stuff, but it helped. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop near my house at 6 p.m. Melissa usually got home around 7 on Fridays when she wasn't going straight to her jerk's place. The plan was for Olivia to come over around 6:30, then we'd wait for Melissa together. We sat there for a bit, not really drinking our coffees, just killing time. At 6:25, we headed to my house. Olivia's car was way nicer than I expected. Some luxury SUV that must have cost a fortune. We walked into the house, and for a second, I hesitated. It felt weird having Olivia here, Melissa's old friend in our space. Except it wasn't our space anymore, and Olivia wasn't really Melissa's friend anymore either. I gave her a quick tour, pointing out random things just to fill the silence. She smiled, that small, knowing smile she had. You don't have to give me the real estate agent walkthrough, Jake. I'm just here for moral support. I chuckled, rubbing the back of my neck. Yeah, guess I'm just not used to, someone actually wanting to be here. She tilted her head at that, like she was reading between the lines. Then, as we stopped in the living room, she suddenly reached out and straightened my shirt collar, smoothing it down with this small touch, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I froze. But the way she did it, so familiar, so casual, it made my stomach tighten. It had been so long since someone touched me with care instead of obligation. There, she murmured, her fingers lingering for just a second too long before she stepped back. You're all set. I swallowed, trying to ignore the heat creeping up my neck. Thanks? She just grinned, plopping onto the couch like she'd always belonged there. Anytime. And just like that, I started seeing Olivia in a way I never had before. Around 7:10, I heard the sound of Melissa's car in the driveway. Olivia and I were settled in the living room, the divorce papers laid neatly on the coffee table, waiting. Everything was in place. The front door opened, and Melissa walked in, oblivious as always. She took a few steps before she noticed us, then froze. Her gaze snapped from me to Olivia, then back again. What's going on? She asked, her tone already defensive. Why is she here? I stood up. We need to talk, Melissa. Her expression darkened as she looked at Olivia again. Why is she here for that? This is our house. She's here as a witness, I said, picking up the envelope, letting her feel the weight of the moment before handing it over. Melissa's arms crossed. A witness? For what? I held the papers out to her. I'm filing for divorce. The way her face dropped, it was priceless. Like her brain short-circuited, scrambling for a response. Divorce? She echoed. Then, as if grasping at straws, she scoffed. Are you serious? Over your little roommate tantrum? I kept my stance, unshaken. No, I said, because you're cheating on me, and have been for months. She let out a laugh, sharp and forced. That's ridiculous. I'm not cheating on you. Don't, I said, cutting through her performance. I know about the guy at the Parkview Apartments. I know how often you're there. The color drained from her face. You followed me? What the hell, Jake? I shook my head, amused at how quickly she shifted the blame. Didn't need to. I tapped my phone. I have weeks of proof. Every late night, every work event, every girls' night out, all leading to the same place. Her eyes flicked to Olivia, then back to me, her shock hardening into anger. You tracked me? That's psychotic. And you brought her here for this? She pointed at Olivia, spitting the words like they'd burn. She's been waiting for this moment since the day she met you. Olivia didn't react. She didn't have to. I wasn't letting Melissa flip the script. Olivia has nothing to do with this, I said smoothly. This is about you, your choices, and the fact that you got caught. Melissa's arms tightened over her chest, shifting gears. So I messed up. People mess up, Jake. That doesn't mean we just throw everything away. Her voice softened, her eyes searching mine. We can fix this. Counseling. A fresh start. I'll stop seeing him. Let's just talk about this. Alone. She cut Olivia a glare, like she could erase her from the room. That's when I twisted the knife. I leaned back, giving her the same blank expression she used on me so many times. Why are you upset anyway? I asked, my tone dripping with sarcasm. I'm just your roommate, right? That's what you wanted. She scoffed, rolling her eyes like I was the one being ridiculous. That dinner? You're still mad about that? Jake, it was a joke. I nodded, like I finally saw her point. Oh, right. A joke. Hilarious. Then I tilted my head. Wait, so you do joke about replacing your husband with another guy? Just checking? Her jaw tightened, but I wasn't done. You were right, though, I continued, voice smooth. We are just roommates. And since I'm the one paying most of the rent, I gestured toward the door. Yeah, I'm gonna need you to pack up and get the hell out of my house. She completely lost it. Started crying, screaming, throwing things. The works. Called me every name in the book, then switched to begging, then back to anger again. Classic manipulation tactics that might have worked on me before, but not anymore. Where am I supposed to go? She kept asking, like it was my problem to solve. I don't know, maybe your boyfriend's place? You seem to spend enough time there already. That just made her more furious. Eventually, she stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. Olivia helped me clean up the mess Melissa left behind. That went about as well as expected, I said, trying to make a joke. Olivia gave me a sympathetic smile. You did great. Stood your ground. Melissa came back the next day with her friend Taylor, expecting to just move back in like nothing happened. I'd changed the locks though, so they were stuck outside calling my phone and banging on the door. I didn't answer, just texted her that she could come get her stuff on Saturday when I'd have my brother there with me. That Saturday was tense. My brother Mike came over early, and good thing he did because Melissa showed up with Taylor and her dad. Probably thought they could intimidate me or something. Her dad started going off about how I had no right to kick his daughter out of her home. I just looked at him calmly and said, "Actually, I have every legal right. My name's on the deed. I owned it before marriage, and your daughter was unfaithful. But hey, if you want to discuss this in court where all the evidence of her affair becomes public record, I'm game." That shut him up pretty fast. Melissa glared at me the whole time while packing her stuff. Tried the crying thing again when her dad and Taylor weren't watching, whispering that she made a mistake and wanted to work things out. I just walked away. The divorce proceedings were actually pretty smooth after that. She didn't contest anything once her lawyer saw all the evidence I had. The whole thing was finalized in about 4 months, which is apparently fast for a divorce. The funny thing is, I heard through mutual friends that her boyfriend dumped her about 2 weeks after she moved in with him. Apparently he was fine with being the side piece, but didn't actually want a relationship with her. So she had to move in with her parents at 28, which must have been a pretty big blow to her ego. As for me and Olivia, well, that's complicated. We definitely got closer through all this. Started officially dating about a month after Melissa moved out, once I felt ready. Turns out Olivia's pretty amazing. Thoughtful, supportive, smart as hell, and we just click in a way Melissa and I never did. We're taking things slow though. Both been burned before and don't want to rush. She stays over sometimes, but we're not living together or anything. She's helping me redecorate the house. Melissa's taste was always a bit much for me anyway. The other day, Olivia and I were having dinner at this restaurant downtown when guess who walks in? Melissa with some new guy. She spotted us immediately and came over to our table, this fake smile plastered on her face. "Well, isn't this cozy?" she said, looking between us. "Didn't take you long to move on?" Before I could respond, Olivia looked up at her and said calmly, "He's not just my roommate, Melissa. He's my everything." The look on Melissa's face was priceless. She just stood there with her mouth open while her date awkwardly tried to pull her away. After they left, I couldn't stop smiling. Olivia looked at me. "Too much?" "No," I said, taking her hand. "Perfect amount." So that's where things stand now. Divorce finalized, house is mine, and I'm dating someone who actually gives a damn about me. Life's not perfect. Divorce is expensive and emotionally draining no matter how justified. But I'm happier than I've been in years. Sometimes I think about that dinner where Melissa called me her roommate. At the time, it felt like the worst moment of my life. Now I realize it was actually the best. It opened my eyes to the truth and forced me to make a change. Crazy how things work out sometimes. Story 2. 15 years of sacrifice ended with my sons. Telling a judge their stepdad was their real dad. Their adoption legally erased their $2 million trust fund, and I let the money revert to me while they celebrated their betrayal. Hey Reddit, I, 48 male, spent 15 years raising my 2 sons alone, doing everything I could to give them a future. Then one day, they stood in court and chose another man over me. What they didn't realize is that their choice set off a chain of events none of us could have predicted. Let's just say, it didn't end the way they thought it would. You don't raise kids for 15 years alone expecting them to spit in your face, but that's exactly how it went down. Harry was 17, Theo 16. I was the one who got up at 5 in the morning, packed their lunches, sat through those boring school concerts, and worked 2 jobs so they didn't go without. Their mom? She bailed early on and came back later with her upgrade, some clown named Pete who walked around like he invented fatherhood. And where do we end up after all those years? Family court. I'll never forget sitting there on those stiff benches. My boys sat across from me, both wearing those dumb grins that teenagers have when they think they've outsmarted everyone. Next to them was my ex-wife, all smug, like she'd just won the lottery. Pete had his arm draped over the back of the bench like he owned the place. The judge hadn't even walked in yet, and I could see her leaning close to Harry and Theo, whispering like a coach drawing up a last-minute play. Her lips moved quick, and Harry nodded. Theo laughed under his breath, like the whole thing was a joke. That was the first punch in the gut. They weren't even nervous. It was like they'd rehearsed betraying me. The judge finally came in and asked the basic stuff. Harry, Theo, are you sure about this adoption? Do you understand what it means? Harry straightened up like he was giving a speech. Yes, Your Honor. Pete is the real father in our lives. He's shown us what being a dad actually means. I swear my ears rang. Real father? I wanted to stand up and scream, who stayed up with you when you had a fever? Who took double shifts so you'd never miss Christmas presents? But I didn't. I sat there, jaw tight, because I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Then it was Theo's turn. And this kid, man, he pulled something from his pocket, and I instantly recognized it. A photo. One of the old ones I kept in the living room. The three of us at the park when he was like 8. I'd thought it went missing months ago. He held it up, ripped it clean down the middle, and let it drop right onto my lap without saying a word. Then he walked across the courtroom and stood by Pete like it was nothing. I can't explain the kind of silence that falls inside your chest when your own son does something like that. It's not loud. It's not even painful at first. It's just empty. The judge banged the gavel. Adoption approved. That's it. 15 years of my life erased in less than 2 minutes. My boys ran to Pete like he was some hero. He wrapped them up in his arms, grinning at me over their shoulders like he'd just won a championship. My ex-wife leaned into him, eyes glinting with victory. I left without saying a word. Walking out of that courthouse felt like leaving a funeral, except the casket was my own damn effort. When I got home, the place felt too quiet. I sat at the table and opened my laptop. For years, I'd kept a separate account tucked away. Every double shift, every weekend job, I saved what I could. The number glared at me. $447,000. That was the nest egg. The proof that I wasn't cheap, just smart. Money meant to help them through college, weddings, life. Now it just sat there, mocking me. I told myself I should be angry, but I wasn't. Not yet. I was hollow. Like someone had scooped me out and left me staring at 4 walls that felt less like home and more like a cage. But somewhere in the middle of all that emptiness, I felt it. A little flicker. Not hope, not sadness. Something sharper. Because if they thought I was going to roll over and disappear, they had no idea who they were dealing with. I laid there on the couch for hours that night. My phone buzzed a couple times with work emails, one spam text, but nothing from Harry or Theo. Not even a sorry dad. Figures. I should have expected that. My head was spinning with numbers, like it always did when I didn't want to think about emotions. That's kind of how I'd survived being a single dad all those years. And then I remembered something. My dad. Their grandfather. He wasn't rich, but he was old school smart with money. Before he passed, he set up a trust fund for Harry and Theo. The whole point was to make sure they had something waiting for them when they hit college. I'd never touched it. Not a dime. Even when things got tight, that fund was off limits. Sacred. So, lying there in that hollow pit of a night, I started thinking, what happens to that trust now that they're not legally my sons anymore? I didn't know the answer, but one guy would. William. He was more than just our lawyer. He'd known me since I was a kid, back when I still had scraped knees and didn't hate the word family. He'd been my dad's friend before he was mine. If anybody could tell me straight, it was him. I called him the next morning. My voice cracked when I told him what went down in court. He didn't sound surprised. Son, I'm sorry, he said. I warned you your ex-wife was maneuvering. Forget her, I said. I need to know about the trust. Dad's fund. What happens to it now? There was a pause on the line. Too long. My stomach twisted. William, don't hold out on me. Finally, he sighed. Your father. He was sharper than you thought. Your dad set up a reversion clause. He wrote that if Harry and Theo ever stopped being your legal dependents, the trust wouldn't stay with them. It would revert back to you as the remainder beneficiary. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, not breathing. Say that again. It's yours now. $2 million. No strings attached. He didn't trust your ex-wife to manage it. He assumed if the boys ever walked away from you, they didn't deserve it. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the wall. $2 million. Plus the $447,000 I'd already saved. $2,447,000 sitting in reach. My father, even from the grave, had seen through all of this. For the first time since court, I smiled. Not a big smile, not joy. Just a small, sharp grin. They thought they upgraded? They thought the broke stepdad with leased cars and credit debt was their golden ticket? They had no clue they just signed away their entire future. I thanked William and promised I'd come by for the official paperwork later in the week. After hanging up, I grabbed the safe out of the closet. Inside was a binder with every password, every bank login, every emergency plan I'd ever made. I opened my accounts and stared at the numbers stacking up. It didn't feel real. Still, the anger wasn't gone. I needed to know how deep this betrayal went. So I dug into the closet again and found Theo's old MacBook. He'd used it during his first years of high school before he begged me for something newer. I'd kept it, half thinking I'd wipe it and use it as a backup. I flipped it open, logged in, and damn if his iCloud account wasn't still connected. The messages started popping up. Photos, group chats, years of history, and what I read made me realize just how far my ex-wife had gone to poison them. He only cares about money, not us. That's why he's always working. Other dads take their kids on trips. He just makes us stay home because he's tight with cash. It's embarrassing when he drops us off in that beat-up car. Everyone stares. Harry. I don't want him showing up at my games. He'll just make me look lame. Theo. Pete actually knows how to treat us. Mom says that's what being a real dad looks like. Years of sacrifice, flipped and twisted into failures. They saw as humiliation. And their mom? She was the architect of it, feeding them that line over and over, painting me as the villain, Pete as the savior. I closed the laptop and just sat there, hands gripping the edge of the desk. For years, I thought I was raising them alone. Turns out, I'd been fighting a ghost war the whole time. But now I had something I hadn't had before. Leverage. They thought they stripped me of my title as father. What they really did was hand me a fortune. And if Pete was already flashing cars and trips he couldn't afford, then this trust fund was the prize he was aiming at. He wanted the money. My ex wanted the money. And my sons? They'd sold themselves cheap because they thought the grass was greener. Well, guess what? The grass on that side is fake, and I was about to start pulling it up by the roots. I didn't have to wait long to see the first cracks. A week after the adoption hearing, Harry texted me a photo of him and Theo at some trendy restaurant, holding up steaks the size of their heads. The caption, "Real dad takes us outright." I saved the photo. Receipts. Funny thing though, what they didn't know was that 2 nights later, I just happened to be at that same place with a coworker. Long story short, a client dinner got moved last minute, and we ended up there. Halfway through my meal, I saw Pete at a table near the bar, puffing up his chest like he owned the place. He had Harry and Theo with him again. The boys looked proud, like royalty being paraded around. But when the check came, I watched the waiter run Pete's card. Swiped once, declined, swiped again, declined. The waiter leaned in and whispered something. Pete forced a laugh and pulled out another card. Declined again. His face went from smug to pale real quick. Harry glanced at Theo, whispering something, but Pete covered it with a fake smile. It's the machine. Happens all the time. Eventually, he slunk off to the ATM across the street, leaving the boys sitting there awkwardly. He came back 10 minutes later with cash, over-tipping like he was proving a point. The whole scene was pathetic. I didn't say a word to them that night, just filed it away in my mental folder labeled Pete, fraud. A few days later, I got a call from William's accountant buddy. I'd asked him to quietly dig into Pete's finances. The guy didn't even try to sugarcoat it. Your ex's husband is screwed. He owes around $400,000 to private lenders. Business is bankrupt. He's juggling loans just to keep the lights on. Honestly, I don't know how he's not in collections already. That explained the showboating. The leased cars, the fancy dinners, the Audis for the boys' 18th nonsense. It was all smoke and mirrors. The man wasn't rich. He was drowning. And if I knew Pete, he was about to start looking for lifeboats. I didn't want to tip my hand too early, so I let it play out. Sure enough, a couple days later, I got a WhatsApp video from Harry. He and Theo were standing next to a red Audi, grinning like idiots. Look what Dad's getting us for our birthdays. One each. Finally, someone who doesn't humiliate us. They looked so smug I almost laughed. The car wasn't even his. The plate still had the dealership logo. I replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji. Nothing more. Let them stew in their own arrogance. What they didn't know was that the accountant's report had already told me the truth. Pete couldn't even keep his own business afloat, much less buy 2 sports cars. So the question was, where was he planning on getting the money? That's when I thought of Hunter, my ex's dad. I hadn't spoken to him in a year, not since my ex had started keeping Harry and Theo away from him. I still had his number, though. I called. Hunter, it's Sean. There was silence, then a tired sigh. I knew you'd call one day. How are my grandsons? Not my sons anymore, I said bitterly. And I told him everything. The adoption, the court, the boys running off with Pete. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then his voice came back, trembling with anger. That bastard. Do you know why she kept them from me? Because she knew I would see through him. Do you know how much he owes me? $60,000. I lent it to him 2 years ago to save his worthless business. He promised me he'd pay me back. Never saw a cent. I gripped the phone tighter. 60 grand? You're kidding. That's not all. His tone dropped. 5 years ago, he faked a workplace accident. Insurance fraud. My daughter helped him forge medical documents. I still have copies of everything. She asked me to store them at my house. I kept them. I sat there stunned. You've got proof? I've got a box full of it, he said. Receipts, papers, everything. I was quiet because she's my daughter. But now? They took my grandsons from me for this con man. No more silence. That box was dynamite. After the call, I sat back in my chair and thought about the chessboard. Pete was leveraged up to his neck. My ex had tied herself to him, convincing Harry and Theo that he was some hero while painting me as the stingy villain. The boys were bragging about cars that didn't exist. Meanwhile, I had proof he was broke. Proof he owed family money. And soon enough, proof he was a fraudster. They thought they cut me out of their lives and their future. What they really did was step into a collapsing house and lock the door behind them. And I was standing outside with the matches. That was the moment I decided this wasn't going to be a quiet grudge. I'd spent 15 years being the guy who swallowed everything and just kept working, kept saving, kept proving myself with actions no one wanted to see. If they thought the adoption was the end of me, they were dead wrong. I wasn't ending. I was staging a show. Not a show in some rented ballroom where they'd strut around like royalty. That would have been too easy for them, too impersonal. No, this was going to happen in the same house they called embarrassing. The same living room where Harry used to roll his eyes at my spreadsheets, and Theo used to complain that our couch wasn't modern enough. If they were going to mock my life, then my life was going to be the stage where they fell apart. So I called my ex. I want to host a dinner, I told her flatly. A farewell party for the adoption. A proper send-off. You, the boys, Pete, some close family. One night to make it official. She hesitated, probably waiting for me to crack. Wow, she finally said. You're finally accepting reality? About time. Just make it nice, Sean. Not one of your cheap cookouts. Something respectable. I bit down a laugh. Don't worry. It'll be something they'll never forget. That night, I sat at my desk making 2 lists. The first one was for her eyes. A handful of cousins, a neighbor or two, a few friends. Safe names. The second was the real list. Pete's old business partner he owed money to, a couple of creditors who'd been circling, and of course, Hunter. I knew she'd edit the official list and think she was in control, while I quietly sent out the invitations she didn't know about. Then came the setup. I pulled the old projector out of the closet and pointed it at the living room wall. Perfect. Crisp enough that no one could say they didn't see the truth. I started building slides like a lunatic. Page after page of my overtime hours logged, my tuition payments, the balance of my savings account, and the pièce de résistance, a scan of the college trust fund clause. Bold, highlighted, unavoidable. This wasn't just a dinner anymore. It was an execution. A few days later, I got a package at my door. No return address. Inside were framed photos I hadn't seen in months. Me with Harry and Theo at the beach, Christmas mornings, Little League games. On top was a note in Harry's messy handwriting. Go ahead and hold on to the scraps. The future belongs to us, not you. I stood there in my kitchen staring at it. I'd thought the ripped photo in court was low. But this? This was deliberate. They'd actually boxed up my fatherhood and shipped it back like unwanted junk. I carried the stack to the fireplace, lit a match, and fed each photo to the flames. Watching them curl into ash didn't hurt like I expected. It felt final, like shutting a door and locking it from my side. That night, instead of wallowing on the couch, I went to the gym. That's where I saw her. Dark hair pulled back, sharp focus, pushing herself hard. She caught me staring once, gave a little nod, then went right back to her set. I didn't even know her name yet. Later, I'd learn it was Elena. But for the first time in years, I realized life might exist outside the wreckage of fatherhood. The closer the dinner got, the more obvious it was that my ex was nervous. She texted me after I sent the guest list. We need to curate this. Some of these names aren't appropriate for a family event. Translation. She'd crossed out every single person who knew the truth about Pete. Perfect. I didn't argue. I just texted back, okay. Let her think she was pulling the strings while I built the trap under her feet. By the end of that week, the house was ready. Living room cleared, chairs borrowed from neighbors, projector tested again and again. My suit hung in the closet, crisp and sharp. The slides were saved in multiple places. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't second-guessing. For the first time since the courthouse, I felt in control. They thought they stripped me of my title as father. What they really did was set the stage for their own unmasking. The matches were ready. All that was left was striking them. But apparently Pete and my ex-wife had the same thought. Only difference? They tried striking first. It started with a phone call. My phone buzzed, and when I saw the name, I almost laughed. Pete. First time he'd ever called me directly. When his name flashed on my screen, I put the call on speaker and set my old phone on the desk to record. I knew whatever came out of his mouth was going to be worth keeping. "Hey, Sean," he said, trying too hard to sound casual. "Figured we should talk man to man." "About what?" I asked, already knowing. "Look, now that I'm Harry and Theo's father, I need access to their educational accounts. My lawyer says as guardian, I'm entitled to manage the college trust your dad set up. So let's not make this messy. Just give me the info, and we'll be good." Quick pause, fellas. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way. Thanks so much for your support. All right, back to the drama. I leaned back in my chair, smirking even though he couldn't see it. That's interesting, because I don't actually know the details. My father handled everything with William, the family lawyer. You'll have to ask him. Silence. Then, sharp. Fine, give me his number. I gave it to him, hung up, and went about my day. 2 hours later, William called me, laughing so hard I could barely understand him. "Son, your ex's husband just rang me, demanding access to the trust. When I explained the clause, that the boys forfeited their rights after adoption, he lost it. He was screaming it was impossible, that he was the legal father now. He sounded like he was about to break something." "Good," I said. "Let him." The next morning, my ex-wife called. No hello, no pretense. "You thief!" she shouted into the phone. "You stole our son's money." "That trust was for them. They're not my sons anymore," I said flatly. "Remember? You made sure of that in court." "You know what I mean," she snapped. "That money was for their education." "You're disgusting." I cut her off. "No, what's disgusting is pushing them into adoption just to get your hands on that trust. And now you're mad the plan backfired. Don't call me again unless it's through a lawyer." I hung up before she could respond. 2 days later, I realized how far they were willing to go. My neighbor, Mrs. Porter, caught me in the driveway. She's the kind of person who notices everything. "Sean," she said, "there were people taking pictures of your house yesterday. Not delivery folks either. Clipboards, writing things down. Looked official." I thanked her and brushed it off, but inside, I knew. Something was coming. That afternoon, the knock came. When I opened the door, there was a social worker and a police officer standing on my porch. "Mr. Alvarez?" the social worker asked. "We've received a complaint regarding child abuse and financial neglect. May we come in?" My heart raced, but my face stayed calm. "Of course." They stepped inside, glancing around like they were checking for traps. The social worker pulled out a file. "The complaint alleges you denied basic financial support to minors for years, causing psychological harm. There are signed statements from the boys." She set the file on my table and slid it across. I opened it. Harry's neat handwriting, Theo's sloppier scrawl. Sworn affidavits saying I'd kept them in inhumane conditions, that I'd refused to buy them clothes, that I deprived them financially out of cruelty. The officer frowned. "These are serious accusations, Mr. Alvarez. If proven, we're talking about criminal charges. Give me a few minutes," I said, walking upstairs. I came back down carrying a box I'd been saving for years. Every bank statement, every tuition receipt, every medical bill. Neatly organized. I laid them out on the table. "Here," I said. "Private school tuition, paid every semester. Health insurance premiums. On time. Groceries, clothing, extracurriculars. 15 years worth. Documented." The social worker flipped through the files for a solid half hour. Her expression changed from suspicion to disbelief. "This clearly shows you provided well above basic support." The officer looked at me. "Do you have any idea why your sons would sign affidavits like these?" "Yes," I said calmly. "Because their parents convinced them to. This is about money. A college trust fund they can't touch anymore. Pete tried demanding access, and when that failed, they filed this. I even have proof." I pulled out my phone, tapped a recording. Pete's voice filled the room. "My lawyer says as guardian, I have the right to manage the trust." Then his frustration when I told him I didn't know the amount. The officer's eyebrows shot up. "That's highly irregular." The social worker closed the file. "We'll need to investigate further, but from this perspective, it seems someone is abusing the system for financial leverage." They left 2 hours later, but not before the officer gave me a warning. If this moves forward, they'll probably try to request a restraining order and freeze your assets. Have your paperwork in order. That night, I sat in my office, the glow of the computer screen lighting the room. They weren't just trying to rob me. They were trying to bury me. False accusations, legal tricks, all of it just to claw at money that wasn't theirs anymore. Fine. If that's the game they wanted, I'd take it further. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. One to Harry's future college, one to Theo's. Good morning, I told the financial aid office. I need to formally withdraw my statement of financial support and my guarantee as a co-signer for my son's student loans. The woman on the line sounded surprised. Is there an issue, sir? They're no longer legally my sons, I said evenly. They were adopted by another man. He's responsible for their educational finances now. Also, they recently filed a complaint accusing me of abuse and neglect. That should be noted. There was a long pause. Understood, sir. This will trigger an immediate review of their enrollment. Without verified financial backing, their guardian will be responsible. Perfect, I said. Send him the bill. That afternoon, I sat back in my chair, staring at the clock. My house was spotless, my documents airtight, and my finger was on the trigger. They wanted a war over money. They were about to learn what it's like to lose everything you counted on. The matches weren't just ready anymore. The first flame was lit. By the time the night of the farewell dinner rolled around, my house didn't even look like my house. The living room was cleared out, folding chairs lined in neat rows. The projector aimed at the wall. The air smelled of catered food, nothing fancy, but enough to impress the people who thought I only knew how to grill burgers on a rusty BBQ. I stood in my new suit, cufflinks shining, feeling sharper than I had in years. Elena arrived at my side, dressed simply but elegant, and when she took my arm, I knew I was walking into that night as a man they wouldn't recognize. The doorbell rang. One by one, they filed in. My ex-wife, smug as ever in a glittery dress. Pete, already sweating through his shirt collar. And behind them, Harry and Theo, both looking uncomfortable, like they weren't sure if this was a trap or not. Wow, my ex said, glancing around. You actually tried. I'll give you that, I smiled. Sit anywhere you like. We'll get started soon. They weren't the only ones. Hunter arrived, shaking my hand firmly, eyes locked on Pete like a predator waiting for the right moment. A couple of Pete's creditors slid in quietly, their faces tight with anticipation. I even caught one guy whispering, "Can't wait to see him squirm." Perfect. The food was served first, just to keep the illusion. Conversations hummed around the room, though most people kept sneaking glances at me. They were waiting for whatever reason I'd drag them into this house. Then, right on cue, my ex-wife raised her glass. Here's to family, she announced, grinning like she'd won. To new beginnings, and to Pete, who stepped up where others failed. The room clapped politely. Harry smirked. Theo nodded along. Pete puffed his chest, soaking in the fake praise. I let the applause die, then stood. Thanks for that, I said calmly. But I think it's time we clear up a few things. Since everyone's here to celebrate, let's make sure we know what exactly we're celebrating. The room quieted instantly. I grabbed the projector remote, and the first slide lit up on the wall. A spreadsheet of my overtime hours. Line after line, years of late nights and double shifts. For 15 years, I began, I worked 2 jobs. Every cent I could, I put toward raising Harry and Theo. Tuition, healthcare, food, clothes, all documented. Some of you here have called me cheap. Some of you thought I didn't do enough. So let's put the numbers out in the open. The next slide showed my savings account, the $447,000 balance I'd built over years. Gasps rippled through the room. And that was just me. What you didn't know was that their grandfather also set up a college trust fund. $2 million. Locked away for their future. Until the adoption. Click. The next slide showed the adoption decree side by side with the trust clause. The words were highlighted. If the beneficiaries cease to be legal dependents, the funds revert to the biological father. So when Harry and Theo walked into that courtroom and chose adoption, I paused, letting the words hang. They didn't just walk away from me. They walked away from this. Murmurs filled the room. My ex-wife shot up from her chair, red-faced. You stole their money. I turned to her. No, you stole my sons from me. And the money legally came back with me when you did. Pete tried to jump in. That's not how this works. I'm their guardian now. That trust... Funny you say that, I cut him off. Because I have you on recording telling me you wanted access to it. Here's the problem, Pete. You don't get to manage what doesn't exist for them anymore. I hit play on the clip. His voice filled the room. My lawyer says as guardian I have the right to manage the trust. Then the frustration when I told him he had nothing. The room went dead silent. Click. The next slide popped up. Debts. $400,000 to private lenders. A business bankrupt for 6 months. This, I said, pointing at the numbers, is the man my sons traded me for. They thought he was buying them Audis, vacations, a better life. But here's reality. He's drowning in debt. Those cars? I clicked again. A still frame of Harry and Theo's WhatsApp video, bragging next to the red convertible. Dealer plates. Not his. Never was. Theo's face went pale. Harry looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. And then Hunter stood. You also owe me $60,000, you lying bastard, he shouted, slamming a folder on the table. You promised to pay it back. Instead, you scammed me like everyone else. Pete stammered, trying to stand, but his creditors closed in, hemming him at the table. I wasn't done. But debt isn't the worst of it, I said coldly. Click. The final slide lit up. Insurance fraud documents, complete with signatures. 5 years ago, Pete faked a workplace accident. My ex-wife helped him forge medical records. Hunter kept the proof. So when you hear about the abuse allegations they filed against me, understand this is who filed them. A con man and his accomplice. Gasps turned to shouts. Phones came out. People snapping photos of the screen. My ex-wife's face crumbled, tears mixing with fury. Harry muttered, "We didn't know," but nobody listened. The room had turned on them completely. I set the remote down. You freed me from being your father in court. Tonight, I'm freeing you from my wallet. That's all I have to say. I turned, offered my arm to Elena, and together we walked toward the door. Behind me, chaos erupted. Hunter yelling, creditors demanding answers, my ex-wife babbling about lies, Pete trying to push through but getting cornered, and Harry and Theo? They just sat there, frozen in the middle of it all, watching the empire they thought they joined collapse around them. Outside, the night was cool, quiet, almost peaceful. For the first time in a long time, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. The fire was burning, and I didn't need to stick around to watch them turn to ash. By the next week, the fallout had already started. Pete's creditors didn't wait. They slapped him with lawsuits and froze what little he had. Within weeks, prosecutors filed charges. A few months later, he took a plea deal and got a 2-year sentence for insurance fraud. Hunter handed over the paperwork, prosecutors pounced, and Pete ended up with a 2-year prison sentence. My ex-wife, cornered, cut a deal. She testified against him in exchange for probation, but the damage was done. She walked away with a criminal record that made her unemployable in any serious field. Her social circle thinned out too. The same people she'd flaunted her upgrade to now avoided her like a plague. As for Harry and Theo, reality doesn't care about teenage arrogance. Without the trust fund, and without me co-signing, Harry's college enrollment was canceled before the semester even started. Theo's early admit slot got pulled too once the financial support vanished. When I withdrew backing and the adoption paperwork hit, admissions flagged their files. Without verified support, everything stalled, and that black mark followed them. Other universities didn't want to touch them either. The so-called future Pete promised vanished overnight. So, they got jobs. Harry ended up stocking shelves on the night shift at a supermarket. Theo waited tables at a chain restaurant, serving meals in the same place he used to eat with his friends for fun. They moved into a tiny one-bedroom apartment, splitting rent and bills. No cars, no vacations, no fancy clothes, just paychecks that disappeared the second they landed. Months passed before I saw them again. One Saturday morning, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, there they were. Thinner, worn out. Not the cocky kids I'd seen in court. They didn't have the smugness anymore. Just exhaustion and something new in their eyes. Respect, maybe even fear. "Hi, Dad," Harry said, voice shaky. I didn't move. "What are you doing here?" Theo swallowed hard. "We wanted to talk, if you have time." Against my better judgment, I let them in. They sat at the table where I'd once shown the social worker my receipts, only this time they brought their own. Pay stubs, a budget journal, notes on what they'd been doing to survive. "For 8 months, we've been working and thinking," Theo said. "About what we did. About what you did for us." Harry's voice cracked. "We called you cheap when you were working 2 jobs to give us everything. Now we know what it feels like to wake up at 5 and still not have enough. We get it now. They didn't beg. They didn't cry. They just laid out their numbers, their plan, and then Harry said, 'We're not asking for gifts. We're asking for a loan. With interest. We want to earn back the right to be your sons.' I didn't say yes right away. I told them I'd think about it. A week later, I sent them a contract drawn up by William, a formal educational financing agreement. The terms were strict. 3% interest. Maintain a minimum 3.5 GPA. Work at least 20 hours a week. Monthly expense reports. Bi-weekly video check-ins. It wasn't fatherly support anymore. It was business. They signed without even reading the fine print. Meanwhile, I wasn't standing still. I invested the trust money wisely, and in less than a year, between a hot market and a small real estate flip I backed, it grew by another $800,000. I traveled, I lived, I finally did things for myself. The first video call with Theo was surreal. He showed me his grades, all A's. His budget was tight, every dollar tracked. "Thank you for giving us a second chance," he said. "You're earning it," I replied. And I meant it. It wasn't the father-son relationship we once had. It was different. Better in a way. No illusions, no entitlement. Respect where there used to be resentment. My ex-wife didn't take it as well. She sent messages for months, most of them blaming me for ruining their lives. The last one simply said, "I hate you." After that, I changed my number. Sometimes I wondered if I'd gone too far, if maybe I'd been too harsh. But then I'd remember Theo's words during the party chaos. "Pete promised us college, cars, trips. He said you were cheap by choice." That wasn't a mistake. That was a decision. And they had to live with it. For 15 years, I carried the weight of being their father. Now, I carried nothing. The money was safe. My life was mine. And for the first time in almost 2 decades, I finally understood what freedom really felt like. Story 3. Parents gave my siblings $200K, excluded me. Then they begged for help after I became successful. Hey, I'm Michael, 27 years old. I guess you could say my whole life, I've been the one that got overlooked. I've got 2 siblings, my older sister Sarah and my younger brother Chris, and to say they were always the golden children is an understatement. It's like they could never do anything wrong in my parents' eyes. Meanwhile, I was just there, I guess. Growing up, Sarah was the perfect student, always getting straight A's, involved in all these school activities, and then she went off to some fancy Ivy League college. My parents were obsessed with it. I swear, from the day she got her acceptance letter, they couldn't stop talking about how proud they were. They threw her this big celebration party, invited all the family and friends. It was like we were having a second Christmas just for Sarah's academic success. Chris, on the other hand, didn't even need to try hard. Things just seemed to work out for him. He followed Sarah's footsteps and got into some fancy grad school program. My parents made sure everything was set up for him too. They covered his tuition, helped him move, got him a new laptop, you name it. And then there was me. I didn't get into any Ivy League school. I went to a state college. It was a good school, but I could feel that it wasn't something my parents would brag about like they did with Sarah and Chris. When I told them I'd gotten accepted, they kind of nodded and said something like, "That's great, Michael." But I could tell their hearts weren't really in it. No celebration, no party. I was lucky if we ordered takeout that night. I guess I tried not to let it bother me. But the older I got, the more I noticed just how different things were for me compared to them. It wasn't just the attention, it was the money too. Like Sarah's wedding? $200,000. No joke. My parents went all out. Venue, catering, the dress, everything. They treated it like the event of the century. I mean, they even flew some of our family in from out of state. For Chris, they paid for his entire graduate degree and helped him out with rent until he could get on his feet. Emily, the youngest, didn't even have to worry about student loans. They covered those too. But me? Well, when I was starting out in my career and needed some tools for work, stuff that was essential to even get going, I asked my parents for help. They gave me $7,000. Now, don't get me wrong, $7,000 is a lot of money. But when you compare it to $200,000 for a wedding or paying off someone's tuition in full, it kind of stings. It felt like I was getting the bare minimum just so they could say they helped. And it wasn't just the money either. It was how every time we got together as a family, I felt like the odd one out. At family dinners, all the conversations were about Sarah's fancy job or Chris's latest achievement. They'd sit there talking about their vacations, new house upgrades, or whatever expensive thing they were planning next. Meanwhile, I'd be sitting there, eating my food, trying to think of something to contribute to the conversation. But honestly, what was I going to say? Hey, I just finished a big project at work and I'm still paying off my car. It felt like my achievements were just kind of small potatoes compared to what they were doing. I remember this one dinner in particular, maybe like a year ago. We were all sitting around the table and the conversation turned, as it usually did, to Sarah's latest vacation plans. "Oh, we're going to Europe for a few weeks. It's just so nice that Mom and Dad are able to help out with the expenses," she said, casually sipping her drink like it was no big deal. Chris chimed in too, talking about some wedding expenses that were covered for him. I don't know what we would have done without that $200,000, honestly, he said, all nonchalant. And then there was Emily, laughing about how glad she was that tuition hikes didn't affect her, thanks to our parents covering everything. I just sat there trying to focus on my plate, but it was like their words were drilling into my brain. It wasn't just the money. They had been handed their futures on a silver platter. Meanwhile, I had to claw my way up and take out loans to get by. Every dollar felt like a struggle, while they acted like they didn't even have to worry about it. And the worst part? No one even seemed to notice I wasn't part of the conversation. I could feel my frustration building. My face got hot, my hands were clenched under the table, and I couldn't keep it in anymore. So I muttered something under my breath. Must be nice. The room went quiet. All eyes were on me. Sarah was the first to speak. What's that supposed to mean, Michael? She had this mix of confusion and annoyance on her face, like she couldn't even begin to understand why I was upset. I took a deep breath and tried to keep my cool, but it all just came out in a rush. It means that not all of us get everything handed to us on a silver platter. Some of us actually have to work for what we need. I could tell they didn't get it. Chris just shrugged and leaned back in his chair like it was no big deal. Michael, you're always acting like you're the victim, he said with that smirk of his. Didn't Mom and Dad help you get those tools for work? That hit a nerve. Sure, they gave me $7,000, but when I thought about everything they'd done for Sarah and Chris, it felt like crumbs. Yeah, they helped, but $7,000 compared to hundreds of thousands? It's not the same, and you know it. Mom tried to smooth things over as usual. Michael, we thought that's what you needed. We've always tried to give you what was fair. But how is $7,000 fair when you're handing out hundreds of thousands to the others? I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. Fair? You think this is fair? You've given them everything. You've practically paved their roads for them. I've had to build mine brick by brick. The conversation spiraled from there, with everyone trying to defend themselves, trying to make it seem like I was just being dramatic. You're blowing this out of proportion, Dad said, shaking his head. We gave you what you needed. Needed? No. They gave me the bare minimum. That's the part that hurt the most. They didn't care about what I wanted, only what they thought was enough to keep me quiet. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor, and left the room without another word. Their voices trailed behind me as I walked out the door, but I didn't look back. I was done being the forgotten one, the one who always got the leftovers. When I stormed out of the house that night, I was fuming. I don't think I've ever been that mad. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest like it was trying to break free, and every step I took down the driveway, it felt like the world was closing in on me. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I needed to get away. Far away. It was late, probably close to 10 p.m., and the streets were quiet. You know that eerie kind of quiet where everything feels a bit too still? Yeah, that was it. The only sound was my shoes hitting the pavement as I walked. I didn't have my phone out or my headphones in. I wasn't in the mood for distractions. I needed to think. As I walked, the memories of that dinner replayed in my head on a loop. Chris's smug face, Sarah's condescending questions. It was like they were all living in this bubble of privilege and didn't even notice how suffocating it was for me. They were all in their happy little world, and I was just the outsider looking in. The more I thought about it, the more frustrated I got. I kept asking myself, why didn't I say more? Why didn't I really let them have it? But then I realized no matter what I said, it wouldn't have made a difference. It was like talking to a brick wall. They had their version of events, and I had mine, and there was no way those two things were ever going to match up. I ended up walking to this park that I used to hang out in when I was a kid. It wasn't far from the house, maybe a 15-minute walk. There was this old bench near the playground, kind of hidden in the corner by some trees. It was one of those places you go when you just need to get away from everything. And that's exactly what I needed. I sat down, leaning back against the cold wood and just stared up at the sky. It was one of those clear nights where you could see all the stars. Normally I'd find it calming, but that night it didn't help. All I could think about was how unfair everything was. How I'd spent my whole life trying to measure up, only to be left with scraps while my siblings were given everything on a silver platter. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and for a second I debated not looking at it. But curiosity got the best of me, so I pulled it out. Of course, it was a text from Emily. Michael, where did you go? You need to come back. Let's talk about this. Talk. Yeah, right. I'd heard that before. Talking never fixed anything in my family. It was always the same old story. Mom and Dad explaining why things were the way they were, and me being told to just accept it. But this time, I wasn't in the mood for more excuses. I didn't respond to the text, just shoved my phone back in my pocket. I wasn't ready to deal with Emily, or any of them for that matter. I needed time to cool off and think things through. Sitting there, I started to go over everything in my head. The years of being overlooked, the moments when I felt like an afterthought. I mean, sure, I wasn't a perfect kid, but I didn't deserve to be treated like I was less important than the others. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about being seen, being valued. And for whatever reason, my parents had decided that my dreams, my needs, didn't matter as much as Sarah's or Chris's. I kicked a rock with my foot, watching it roll across the playground. I couldn't stay out there forever, even though the idea of never going back to that house was tempting. Eventually, I had to figure out what I was going to do. But for now, I just needed to be alone. I don't know how long I sat there, but after a while, the cold started to creep in. Fall was just around the corner, and the nights were getting chillier. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, feeling the wind cut through the thin fabric. I thought about heading home, but the idea of walking back into that house, facing them after everything that had happened, felt unbearable. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. Emily's name flashed across the screen. I stared at it for a moment, considering whether or not to pick up. Part of me wanted to just ignore it, but another part of me thought, maybe she actually gets it this time. I hesitated for a few more seconds before finally swiping to answer. Michael, where are you? Emily's voice came through, calm but with that usual hint of superiority that always grated on my nerves. Doesn't matter, I replied, my voice flat. I'm not coming back tonight. Come on, you're being ridiculous. We're family. We need to talk this out, she said, like it was that simple. Talk? I let out a bitter laugh. You mean like we always do, where I get told why I should be grateful for what little I get, and you all pat yourselves on the back for being such great siblings? That's not fair, she shot back. We didn't know you felt like this. How could you not know? I said, my frustration rising again. Every time we sit down as a family, it's all about you, Sarah, and Chris. You get the trips, the houses, the weddings, and I get left with whatever's left over. I'm sick of pretending it doesn't bother me. There was silence on the other end. I could almost hear her trying to come up with something to say, something that would make everything better, but nothing came. Look, maybe we haven't seen things from your perspective, Emily finally said, her voice softer. But running away like this isn't going to solve anything. This isn't about tonight, Emily, I said, rubbing my temples. This is about every time I've been left out, every time you guys got to live your best lives while I was stuck trying to make ends meet. I needed help too, and all I got was a toolbox. She didn't say anything for a while, and I could hear the faint sounds of the house in the background. Laughter, dishes clinking, like nothing had even happened, like I didn't matter. Just come back, she said eventually. We'll figure it out, okay? But I wasn't ready to figure anything out. Not with them. Not yet. I need time, I said, before hanging up and shoving my phone back in my pocket. I leaned back on the bench and stared at the stars again. It was going to take more than just a conversation to fix this. They didn't understand, and maybe they never would. But at least for tonight, I wasn't going to be the one sitting quietly, pretending everything was okay. I didn't sleep much that night after walking out of the park. When I got back to my apartment, my mind was still racing, and the weight of everything that happened sat heavy on my chest. I just lay there in bed, staring up at the ceiling, replaying the dinner over and over again. No matter how many times I went through it in my head, I couldn't figure out how it got to this point. How was it that my own family could be so blind to everything I'd been dealing with for years? I mean, I get it. They were busy with their own lives, but was it really that hard to see how unfair things had been? As the hours ticked by, I started thinking deeper about what had happened. Not just at dinner, but everything that led up to it. All the years of being left out, all the moments I'd brushed off as no big deal when really they had been building up. One on top of the other. I realized that this wasn't just some one-time thing. This had been going on for as long as I could remember. It wasn't just about the money. Sure, the financial stuff hurt, but it was more than that. It was about how I'd been treated, how I'd always been the one who had to fend for myself while they were being taken care of. I was the one who had to figure things out on my own. And honestly, it wasn't even like I wanted their help. I just wanted them to see me, to acknowledge that I existed, and that my life mattered just as much as Sarah's and Chris's. As I lay there in bed, staring into the darkness, I realized something else. I wasn't angry anymore. I mean, I was still frustrated, but the fire I'd felt earlier had simmered down. Instead, I felt this deep sense of exhaustion. like I was just tired of it all. Tired of trying to fight for a place in a family that seemed to have decided long ago that I wasn't worth the same attention as my siblings. I don't know what time I finally fell asleep, but when I woke up the next morning, everything felt a little clearer. Not easier, just clearer. I knew that nothing was going to change unless I made it change. They weren't going to suddenly wake up one day and realize how unfair they'd been. It was up to me to make them see it. The problem was, how? I wasn't even sure where to start. Part of me wanted to just cut ties completely and go on with my life. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the answer. As messed up as things were, they were still my family. I didn't want to walk away from them, not entirely. I just wanted things to be different. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time that morning, staring out the window at the empty street below. It was early, barely past 7 a.m., and everything was still and quiet. I couldn't stop thinking about all the times I'd tried to bring up these issues before, how I'd hinted at the unfairness only to be brushed off or told I was overreacting. But I wasn't overreacting. I just never had the chance to really lay it all out for them. That's when it hit me. The only way they were going to understand was if I showed them, plain and simple. I needed to spell it out in a way they couldn't ignore or argue against. Numbers don't lie, right? I wasn't sure if they'd listen, but at least they wouldn't be able to dismiss me as dramatic or jealous like they had so many times before. I spent the rest of the morning digging through old files, emails, bank statements, anything that could help me make my point. I had receipts for the tools my parents helped me buy, but I also knew they'd helped Sarah and Chris with so much more over the years. I started putting everything together, organizing it all into neat little piles that told the story I'd been trying to tell for years. It wasn't easy. Going through all those old documents was like ripping open old wounds. I found emails where my parents had promised Sarah money for a down payment on her house, and then I found texts from my dad saying they couldn't really help me out with rent because they had already given a lot to Sarah that year. It stung. It really stung. But it also motivated me. This wasn't just in my head. I had the proof right in front of me. As I worked, my phone buzzed a few times. More texts from Emily, probably still trying to get me to talk it out. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to talk. I needed to be prepared first, and I wasn't there yet. I ended up working all day. By the time I finished putting everything together, it was late afternoon, and I was drained, mentally and emotionally. But I had something solid now, something I could take to them and say, look, this is what I've been dealing with. This is why I'm upset. It felt like a weird kind of victory, but not in a happy way. More like, okay, now they have to listen. It wasn't going to be easy, and I knew they'd probably get defensive, especially Sarah. She always acted like she was entitled to everything she got, but I was ready for that now. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the pile of papers in front of me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of something. I wasn't just sitting back and letting things happen to me anymore. I was taking charge of the situation. Now, all that was left was to decide when and how I was going to confront them. I didn't want to do it over the phone or through texts. This needed to be face to face. But the thought of sitting down with all of them again after what happened at dinner made my stomach turn. It was going to be awkward as hell, but it had to be done. I knew they were planning another family dinner soon, something for Emily's birthday. The timing wasn't great. Who wants to ruin a birthday? But honestly, when was there ever a good time to bring this stuff up? There wasn't. And I wasn't about to wait around for another year hoping things would magically get better. So that was it. I'd confront them at Emily's birthday dinner. It wasn't going to be pretty, and it definitely wasn't going to be easy, but it was time to stop pretending like everything was fine. I wasn't going to be the forgotten one anymore. When the day of Emily's birthday dinner rolled around, I was nervous. I had everything ready. Every document, every piece of evidence that showed just how much my parents had favored Sarah and Chris over me. But knowing I was about to walk into a situation that was going to be awkward, uncomfortable, and probably end with a lot of yelling, didn't sit right with me. I wasn't trying to ruin Emily's birthday, but there wasn't exactly a perfect moment to do this. It had to happen, and it had to be soon. I got to my parents' house a little early, probably to give myself time to calm my nerves. When I walked in, everything seemed normal, like nothing had happened a few nights ago at that disaster of a family dinner. Mom was bustling around the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on dinner, and Dad was out back, grilling something on the BBQ like he always did when the weather was nice. Emily was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, completely oblivious to what was about to go down. She looked up when she saw me and gave me a smile. "Hey Michael, you good?" she asked, like everything was fine between us. Yeah, I'm fine, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I wasn't fine, though. My heart was racing, and I could feel the folder full of documents tucked under my arm like it was burning a hole through my shirt, but I had to keep it together. Sarah and Chris showed up not long after, laughing and chatting like they hadn't noticed anything wrong either. It was amazing how easily they just moved on from things. Meanwhile, I'd been carrying the weight of all this crap for years, and it was finally about to explode. We sat down to eat, and for the first 20 minutes or so, it was the same as always. Mom asked about work. Sarah talked about some upcoming vacation with her husband. Chris made a joke about how he still couldn't believe how expensive weddings were. I sat there, barely touching my food, waiting for the right moment. And then it came. After we'd finished eating and everyone was settling into dessert, I put my fork down and cleared my throat. I need to talk to you all, I said, my voice sounding way more confident than I felt. Everyone looked up at me, confused. Dad raised an eyebrow. What's up, Michael? I took a deep breath and opened the folder, pulling out the first set of documents. I've been thinking a lot about what happened the other night, and I realized that I've never really laid it all out for you guys. I've been carrying this around for years, and it's time I showed you why I feel the way I do. Mom looked concerned, glancing at the folder. Michael, can't we just enjoy the evening? It's Emily's birthday. I know, I interrupted, trying not to let her guilt me into backing down. And I'm sorry, but there's never going to be a good time to do this. I need you all to listen. I stood up and walked over to the living room, hooking my laptop up to the TV. I could feel everyone's eyes on me as I clicked through the folders on my desktop, pulling up the presentation I'd spent days putting together. It wasn't fancy, just a slideshow with numbers, dates, and pictures of the documents I'd gathered. The first slide was simple, a chart comparing how much my parents had spent on each of us for education. Sarah's name was at the top, followed by Chris, then Emily. My name sat at the bottom, with a number that was embarrassingly low compared to the rest. What's this? Chris asked, leaning forward on the couch. This is what I've been dealing with, I said, keeping my voice calm even though my hands were shaking. This is how much you spent on Sarah's college tuition. And this, I clicked to the next slide, is how much you spent on Chris's graduate degree. And here's Emily's, all her student loans covered. I paused for a moment, letting the numbers sink in. Sarah and Chris exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one said anything yet. And this, I said, clicking to the final slide, is how much you gave me. $7,000 for tools. That's it. No tuition help, no house down payment, no wedding fund, just $7,000. The room was silent. I could see the wheels turning in their heads as they processed the numbers. Mom looked like she was about to cry, and Dad was frowning, clearly not happy with where this was going. Michael, Mom started, but I cut her off. I'm not saying you didn't help me, I said, trying to stay calm. But you can't sit there and tell me this is fair. Look at the difference. You gave them everything they needed to get ahead, and I got leftovers. Dad sighed and leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. We gave you what we thought you needed, Michael. You didn't ask for help with school. I didn't ask because I knew you wouldn't offer, I shot back. And I shouldn't have to beg to get the same support Sarah and Chris got. You just handed it to them. You didn't even think twice. Sarah, who had been quiet up until now, finally spoke. Michael, why are you bringing this up now? We never knew you felt this way. Because every time I've tried to bring it up, you've all brushed me off, I said, my frustration creeping into my voice. Every time I've hinted that maybe things aren't as fair as you think, you've told me to stop being dramatic or that I should be grateful for what I got. But it's not about the money. It's about how you've all made me feel like I don't matter as much as you. Emily looked down at her plate, clearly uncomfortable with the whole thing. I didn't know it was this bad, Michael, she mumbled. That's the point, I said, clicking off the presentation. None of you knew because none of you bothered to look. You were all too busy living your perfect lives, and I was just there, trying to keep my head above water. There was a long pause after that. Mom wiped a tear from her eye, and Dad was still frowning, but no one argued. For the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, they were starting to understand. I'm not asking for an apology, I said, breaking the silence. I just wanted you to see what I've been dealing with. I wanted you to understand why I feel the way I do. The room stayed quiet, and I could feel the tension in the air. No one knew what to say, and honestly, that was fine with me. I didn't need them to say anything. I just needed them to see. After my presentation, I could tell no one really knew what to say. The air was thick, like the tension had just doubled. and everyone was stuck in their heads trying to figure out how to respond without making things worse. Honestly, I wasn't expecting an immediate apology or some big resolution right there at the table, but I had hope for something, maybe some acknowledgement that what I'd been feeling wasn't all in my head. I sat back down, my heart still racing. I could see my mom fidgeting with her napkin, her eyes darting from one of my siblings to the next, trying to gauge what everyone was thinking. Dad hadn't said much since the presentation started, but I could tell he wasn't happy. His arms were crossed, and his jaw was clenched like he was trying to keep himself from saying the wrong thing. Classic dad move. Hold it in until he explodes later. Sarah finally broke the silence. I didn't realize it was that bad, she said softly, her voice sounding more serious than I was used to. She didn't look at me, though, just kind of stared down at the table, poking at the remains of her cake. I raised an eyebrow. You didn't realize? Come on, Sarah, it's not like this is new. I've been dropping hints for years, and every time I brought something up, it got brushed aside. She glanced at me for a split second before going back to her cake. I don't know. I don't know. It wasn't much of an answer, but at least she was saying something. Chris, on the other hand, still looked annoyed, like I'd just ruined a perfectly good evening with all my drama. Michael, I get that you feel like you've been left out or whatever, but we all got what we needed, he said, leaning back in his chair. I mean, I worked hard too. Just because mom and dad helped me out doesn't mean I didn't put in the effort. That hit a nerve. Effort? Are you serious, Chris? I'm not saying you didn't work hard, but you didn't have to struggle the way I did, I snapped. You always had a safety net. Mom and dad were there for you every step of the way, making sure you had everything you needed. Meanwhile, I was scraping by, trying to figure things out on my own. It's not the same, and you know it. Chris shrugged, like he still didn't get it, or didn't care to. It's not about effort, I continued, trying to keep my voice steady. It's about how you guys got handed opportunities I never had. It's about the difference between me having to hustle just to get by, while you had the luxury of focusing on your dreams without worrying about rent or bills. Emily, who'd been quiet this whole time, finally spoke up. Michael, I'm sorry. I really didn't know you felt this way. I didn't even think about the money side of things. I sighed. That's the thing. No one thought about it because it wasn't affecting you. It's easy to ignore something when it doesn't directly impact your life. She nodded, looking a little guilty, and for a moment I thought maybe she actually got it. Maybe they all did, at least a little, but I still wasn't convinced. Dad cleared his throat, and we all turned to him. He'd been so quiet I'd almost forgotten he was sitting there. Michael, your mom and I, we never meant to make you feel this way, he said, his voice slow and careful, like he was picking each word cautiously. We thought we were doing what was best for all of you. I could feel the frustration bubbling up again, but I bit my tongue. I needed to hear him out. We gave Sarah and Chris what they needed for school because that's what they asked for. You, on the other hand, you never really asked for much. You always seemed so independent, like you didn't want our help. I blinked at him, not sure if he was being serious or if he just didn't get it. Dad, I didn't ask for help because every time I tried, I was told there wasn't any money left, or that you'd already done enough for me. What was the point of asking if I knew what the answer was going to be? Mom jumped in at that point, her voice softer, almost pleading. Michael, we did what we thought was fair, based on what each of you needed at the time. Maybe we didn't realize the gap was so big, but we were trying to do our best. I shook my head, rubbing my temples. It's not just about the money, Mom. It's about how I've been made to feel like the odd one out my entire life. You guys were so wrapped up in making sure Sarah and Chris were taken care of that you didn't even notice I was struggling. I wasn't asking for a handout. I was just asking to be seen. The room fell silent again, the weight of my words hanging in the air. I could tell my parents were processing it, trying to figure out how to respond. Dad let out a long sigh, looking older than I remembered. Michael, we never wanted to make you feel like you didn't matter. We love you. You know that, right? I nodded, but it felt hollow. I know you love me, but love isn't just about words. It's about actions. And your actions have made it pretty clear where your priorities were. Mom wiped at her eyes with a tissue, her voice trembling as she spoke. We didn't mean to hurt you, Michael. We really didn't. I could feel my anger starting to fade, replaced by a dull ache in my chest. I wasn't looking to hurt them either. I just wanted things to be different. I wanted them to understand how much this had affected me, and I wasn't sure if they fully did. But at least the conversation was happening. That was something, right? Sarah cleared her throat, breaking the silence. I think we need to figure out a way to make this right. It's not fair that Michael's been left out, and we can't just ignore that. Chris nodded, though he still didn't look happy about it. Yeah, maybe we can figure something out. Mom and Dad exchanged a glance, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were all on the same page, or at least heading in the right direction. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a mix of exhaustion and relief. This wasn't going to fix everything. Years of feeling like the forgotten one in my family weren't going to disappear overnight. But maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something better. After that last family dinner, I told my parents and siblings that I'd had enough. I was done being the afterthought, done being the one who always had to accept less while they got more. I remember sitting there, telling them that I planned on talking to the rest of the family about it. I wanted to hear their opinions because honestly, I was curious if anyone else had ever noticed how I'd been treated. That's when my dad, of all people, turned to me with this cold look on his face. "Michael, you should just be happy with what you got," he said. "If you don't like it, then maybe you should leave." That hit hard. I mean, I always knew where I stood with them, but hearing it so bluntly like that, it felt like the last nail in the coffin. So I did exactly what he said. I left. Not just that night, but for good. From that point on, I decided to focus on me. I had wasted too much time trying to get their approval, trying to make them see me as an equal. It wasn't worth it anymore. I threw myself into my work, into building the life I wanted without them weighing me down. I knew I had potential, and I wasn't going to let their lack of support hold me back any longer. It wasn't easy at first. Walking away from your family isn't something you can just do without feeling some guilt. But the more I distanced myself, the more I realized how much energy I had been putting into trying to win their approval. I started to focus on my career, putting in the hours, and really grinding. And guess what? It paid off. A few years went by, and my life completely turned around. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. My work was going better than I ever could have imagined. I started off small, just trying to make ends meet, but eventually I grew my business to the point where I was hiring more employees. I had a full team working for me, and the satisfaction of knowing I'd built it all on my own was something I'd never felt before. And here's the thing, I didn't just get by, I did really well. The kind of success that made me look back at all those times I felt like I wasn't good enough and laugh. I had clients coming in from all over, and I was making connections that I never thought I'd have. I guess, in a weird way, walking away from my family pushed me to prove that I could make something of myself without their help. But just as I was settling into this new phase of my life, I got a call. It was from my mom, which surprised me because we hadn't talked much since I left. My phone buzzed and her name flashed on the screen. For a moment, I debated ignoring it, but something in me decided to pick up. "Michael, we need to meet," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. There was something in her tone that I couldn't quite place. It wasn't the usual, "we need to talk" guilt trip I had gotten used to over the years. It sounded desperate. I hesitated. Meeting with them wasn't something I really wanted to do, but curiosity got the better of me. So, after some back and forth, we agreed to meet at a cafe. When I walked in, they were already sitting at a small table near the window. They looked different, tired, older. My dad, who always had this confident, almost arrogant posture, was slouched in his chair, looking more worn out than I'd ever seen him. Mom had dark circles under her eyes, and she kept fidgeting with her cup, which wasn't like her at all. Something was off. "Thanks for coming," my mom said as I sat down. I didn't say much, just nodded, waiting for them to get to the point. After a moment of awkward silence, my dad finally spoke up. "Your siblings, they've cut contact with us," he said, his voice quieter than I expected. I blinked, not sure if I'd heard him right. "What do you mean?" "They don't talk to us anymore," my mom chimed in, her voice shaky. "Sarah moved away with her husband and she won't return our calls. Chris, he's distanced himself too. And Emily, well, we haven't heard from her in months." I sat there, trying to process what they were saying. It was hard to believe, honestly. Sarah, Chris, and Emily had always been the golden children, the ones who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. Now they were the ones who had walked away. We're struggling, Michael," my mom continued. "Without them, we're really struggling. Financially, emotionally, everything." There it was. The real reason they wanted to meet. They needed help. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a mix of emotions swirling inside me. A part of me felt like this was some kind of twisted karma. They had pushed me aside for years, ignored me when I needed support, and now they were the ones coming to me for help? The irony wasn't lost on me, but at the same time, I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. I wasn't sitting there thinking, "Ha, this is what you deserve." Instead, I just felt tired. Tired of all the drama, the years of resentment, the constant need to prove myself. So, what exactly do you want from me? I finally asked, keeping my voice steady. We were hoping you could help us out, my dad said, avoiding eye contact. We know things haven't been great between us, but we're really in a tough spot, financially especially. There it was, the money. I should have seen it coming. I looked between the two of them, wondering if they had any idea how ridiculous this all was. The same parents who had told me to be happy with what I got were now asking me for help because their golden children had ditched them. I don't know, I said honestly. I mean, you made it pretty clear a few years ago that I wasn't your priority. And now you're asking me to help you because Sarah and Chris don't want to? They looked at each other, and for a moment, I saw something in their faces that I hadn't seen before. Regret. Real genuine regret. We know we messed up, Michael, my mom said softly. We should have treated you better. We didn't realize it until it was too late. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. There was a part of me that wanted to forgive them, to be the bigger person. But another part of me, the part that had spent years feeling overlooked and undervalued, wasn't ready to let go of all that hurt. I'll think about it, I said, standing up to leave. But I'm not making any promises. As I walked out of the cafe, I realized something. I didn't owe them anything. Not anymore. Story 4. Don't tell me what to do. You're not even my dad, my stepdaughter said in front of my friends. When I confronted her, my wife said, if you want to control someone, have your own child. I just smiled. The next morning, everything changed, and I watched them both panic. All right, Reddit. I spent 13 years raising this girl and funding her lifestyle, until she stopped treating me like a father and started treating me like her personal ATM. The worst part? My wife backed her up. Everything imploded when she insulted me in front of my friends. I nuked the college fund and divorced her mother. 5 years later, they showed up again, broke and desperate. Here's what went down. I'm 47 male, a plumber. I built the business with my brother Tony. Some people think it's unglamorous work, but the money's actually pretty good. By 28, I'd saved enough to buy a 3-bedroom house in cash. 2 years later, at 30, I started dating Valerie. Met her at some buddy's barbecue. She was 26, recently divorced, dragging around a 5-year-old named Ellie, who hid behind her mom's legs like I was the boogeyman. Valerie seemed different from the usual dating pool disasters. No fake designer shit, no Instagram obsession, just a woman who wanted someone reliable. Her ex-husband was a textbook piece of work who'd bailed when Ellie was 2 and moved across the country. His idea of child support was maybe remembering to send $200 every few months when guilt struck. Real stand-up guy. Meanwhile, Valerie was working part-time at a daycare, living in some cramped apartment that probably violated several housing codes, driving a Honda with more miles than a space shuttle. The breakthrough with Ellie came about 2 months into dating Valerie. The kid fell off her bike, scraped her knee, and Valerie was stuck at work. Daycare called me because apparently I was the emergency contact now. I dropped everything, picked up this sobbing little girl, cleaned her wounds, and slapped on some cartoon band-aids. While I'm playing field medic, she looks up at me with those huge brown eyes and drops a bomb. Thank you, Daddy. Not my name. Daddy. Turns out she'd been asking Valerie for weeks if I was going to be her new dad. When I asked what she wanted to call me, she thought for exactly 2 seconds before saying Dad, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. That hit me right in the chest. I'd never wanted kids, never saw myself as dad material, but here's this little girl who'd been abandoned by her biological father just handing me that title like a gift. The moment that truly sealed it happened about a month later. I was fixing a leaky faucet in their apartment. The place was a disaster. The landlord wouldn't fix anything. When Ellie came running in from the playground, covered in dirt and grinning like she'd discovered buried treasure. Dad! Dad! Look what I found! She thrust a handful of dandelions at me like they were made of gold. Not flowers, weeds. But to her, they were the most beautiful thing in the world, and she wanted to share them with me. These are for you, because you fix everything, she said, completely serious. Mommy said you make everything better. Tony happened to be there helping with the faucet, and I caught him actually getting misty-eyed. Later, he told me, kids got you figured out better than most adults. You do fix everything. Just make sure they don't break you in the process. Prophetic words as it turned out. We got married when Ellie was 7. She insisted on being both flower girl and ring bearer because it's my wedding too. During the ceremony, when the pastor asked if anyone objected, she stood up and yelled, I do, meaning she approved. The whole place lost it. Those early years were magical. Ellie transformed from this shy, uncertain kid into this confident little person who waited by the door for me every day, covered in whatever mess she'd created, bursting with stories about school. "Dad, look what I made!" became the soundtrack of my existence. I was all in. Bedtime stories, father-daughter dances, teaching her to throw a baseball without looking like she was having a seizure. This wasn't some obligation I'd inherited. This was my kid, and I was her dad in every way that actually mattered. Blood's just biology. Showing up is what makes you a father. The Saturday morning routine became sacred. Every weekend, just me and Ellie hitting up Home Depot for project supplies, then grabbing breakfast at this greasy diner she loved. She'd order chocolate chip pancakes and tell me elaborate stories about her imaginary friend while I pretended to understand 7-year-old logic. Those were the moments when everything felt right. I started the college fund when she was 8. Every month, religiously, plus bonuses from the big commercial jobs. By the time she hit 10, there was already $15,000 sitting there. Valerie's friends would comment on how lucky she was to find a real one who treated Ellie like his own. But here's the thing. I didn't treat her like my own. She was my own. For 8 beautiful years, I thought we had something unbreakable. I should have known better. 13. That's the age when my little girl who used to sprint to the door when I got home turned into someone I barely recognized. It started small, eye rolls when I asked about homework, that teenage whatever becoming her default response to basically everything I said. But the real kick in the teeth? She stopped calling me Dad. The transition happened gradually, then all at once. It went from, "Dad, can you help me with this?" to just avoiding me entirely. When she absolutely had to acknowledge my existence, it was my first name. Cold, distant, like I was some random dude who happened to live in her house and pay all her bills. The first time she called me by my first name, I thought I'd misheard. We were at Target buying school supplies, and she asked, "Can Isaac get me the expensive notebooks?" Like I wasn't standing right there. Valerie didn't even notice, just nodded and threw the shit in the cart. I pulled her aside in the parking lot. "Why are you calling me Isaac?" "I'm your dad." She shrugged. "Whatever. You know what I meant." No correction from Valerie. No apologize to your father. Just another sign that respect wasn't required anymore. Valerie kept insisting it was just a phase. All girls go through this. But this wasn't normal teenage rebellion. This was targeted disrespect. Ellie would be perfectly fine with Valerie, laughing and chatting, but the second I walked into a room, she'd get this look like I'd just tracked dog shit through the house. Tony noticed it immediately when he came over to help me rewire the kitchen. "Your kid just walked past me like I had the plague, then asked her mom for $20 without even acknowledging you exist. You paying for a teenager or housing a hostile foreign exchange student?" The demands escalated right alongside the disrespect. Suddenly, nothing I provided was good enough. The $60 shoes became an insult. She needed the $180 ones. The iPhone I got her for her 14th birthday was the wrong color. Everything had to be name brand, expensive, exactly what her friends had, because God forbid Princess looked like she came from a working-class household. Ashley's stepdad bought her the new MacBook. Stepdad. That word started showing up more and more, and every time it felt like a slap. This kid who'd called me daddy for 8 years was now referring to me like some stranger who'd married her mom for the health insurance. I started keeping track of the expenses just to maintain my sanity. Monthly phone bill, $80. Car insurance, $150. Dance classes, $120. Designer jeans, $200. Makeup that cost more than my work boots, $150. And that was just 1 month. For someone who treated me like an inconvenience. The breaking point came during sophomore year. I'd spent 12 hours dealing with a commercial backup that was literally shit. Covered in it, exhausted, in no mood for teenage drama. Ellie's in the kitchen demanding money for some school trip. I need $200 for the senior trip deposit. You're a sophomore. It's an early bird thing. Everyone's doing it. I was too tired to argue with teenage logic. Ask me tomorrow when I can think straight. Cue the eye roll so dramatic I thought she'd detach a retina. Whatever. You never want to pay for anything fun anyway. And that's when something in me snapped. I set down my work bag and looked at this kid I'd been funding for 8 years. "Excuse me? I've been paying for your fun for 8 years. Dance classes, summer camps, that ski trip, concert tickets, shopping sprees. What exactly do you think I've been doing with my money? That's different. That's like basic stuff. Basic stuff. 8 years of basic stuff that probably cost me 80 grand, not counting the house, food, and everything else that kept her lifestyle afloat. You know what? You're right. I'll stick to basic stuff. Food, shelter, utilities, everything else is extra, and extra costs gratitude. You figure out how much gratitude you want to show me, and I'll figure out how much extra I want to provide. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Probably the first time in her life, someone had connected her attitude to consequences. You can't be serious. Dead serious. That night, Valerie tried to smooth things over with promises that Ellie would do better, that things would change. But I could see it in her eyes. She thought I was being unreasonable. She thought asking for basic human decency was asking too much. The respectful kid was gone. Now I was living with a stranger who happened to share DNA with my wife, and this stranger thought I existed solely to fund her lifestyle while she treated me like garbage. Tony's words kept echoing in my head. Just make sure they don't break you in the process. Too late for that advice, brother. The breaking had already begun. Junior year brought the full transformation of my wife from my partner to Ellie's defense attorney. Every conversation about Ellie's behavior became a negotiation where I was somehow always the unreasonable party. Every boundary I tried to set got overturned the second I left for work. The car situation was my Damascus Road moment. I'd been saving for months to get Ellie something safe and reliable for her 16th birthday. Found a perfect Honda Civic, 3 years old, low miles, great safety ratings. Exactly what a new driver needed. But Princess wanted a BMW because her friend Madison had gotten one. Suddenly, my practical choice was embarrassing and would make everyone think we were poor. Madison's stepdad understands that image matters, she informed me during one of our family meetings, which had basically become sessions where Ellie made demands, and Valerie found creative ways to justify them. The family meetings were Valerie's bright idea for improving communication. In reality, they were just formalized sessions where I got outvoted 2-1 on every decision involving money. Ellie would present her demands, Valerie would explain why they were reasonable, and I'd be expected to fund whatever nonsense they'd agreed on. I bought the Honda anyway. Got 2 weeks of silent treatment and passive-aggressive comments about how her real dad would have understood. Her real dad who hadn't called in 6 months and sent child support about as often as Halley's Comet shows up. The silent treatment was almost peaceful, honestly. No demands, no eye rolls, no being treated like an ATM with legs. Tony came over that weekend and immediately noticed the improvement in my stress levels. Kids giving you the cold shoulder? Looks like she's doing you a favor. When I told him about the BMW demands, he shook his head. Kids getting a lesson in reality. Most of us were lucky if our first car had a working radio and tires that matched. But the fight that really opened my eyes happened when Ellie borrowed Valerie's car and came home with a scrape down the side from hitting a pole. When I pointed out the $800 worth of damage, Valerie's response was that accidents happen. Ellie, having overheard, decided to grace us with her wisdom. Maybe if you'd bought me a car with better safety features, this wouldn't have happened. The audacity was breathtaking. She damaged property through careless driving, and somehow this was my fault for not buying her a luxury vehicle. That's interesting logic, I said, keeping my voice level. So if I buy you a Ferrari and you crash it, that's my fault for not getting you a tank. Don't be ridiculous. No, please. Explain to me how your inability to judge distances while parking is my responsibility. That's when Valerie jumped in with her standard defense playbook. She's learning. Everyone has accidents when they're starting out. Everyone pays for their accidents when they're starting out. That's how learning works. But instead of Ellie taking responsibility, they wanted me to pay for the repair without any consequences for the driver. When I suggested she get a part-time job to cover the damage, Valerie acted like I'd suggested indentured servitude. She needs to focus on school. She needs to focus on not hitting stationary objects with moving vehicles. That night, I decided it was time for a come-to-Jesus meeting. I sat them both down and laid it out plain. Ellie, I've been your father for 11 years. I've provided for you, protected you, and loved you like my own blood. But somewhere along the way, you've decided that makes me your personal ATM instead of your dad. The silence that followed was telling. When I asked her when she'd last thanked me for anything, called me dad, or acted like she was happy to see me, she had nothing. I've spent probably $100,000 on you over the years. College fund, activities, clothes, food, housing, insurance, medical bills. And your response is to treat me like I'm some inconvenience you have to tolerate to get to the money. When I turned to Valerie about enabling this behavior, she hit me with the classic, she's a teenager excuse. She's 17 years old. In 1 year, she'll be an adult. And right now, she's completely unprepared for a world that won't hand her everything she wants just because she exists. Valerie's response was that I couldn't make love conditional. But I wasn't making love conditional. I was making financial support conditional. Because right now, I felt like a stranger in my own home, and the two people I'd been supporting were treating me exactly like one. I drew a line in the sand that day. Ellie would start contributing to the household with chores, respect, and basic human decency. Valerie would back me up instead of undermining every boundary I set. Or I'd find somewhere else to live where I was actually wanted. The ultimatum bought me exactly 3 days of improved behavior before things went back to normal. They thought I was bluffing. They were about to find out how wrong they were. Senior year brought tension you could cut with a knife. The dinner party incident was the final nail in the coffin. I was hosting some friends. Mike and his wife Sarah, couple other guys from the trade, plus Tony. Nothing fancy, just grilling burgers and having drinks on a Saturday night. Standard weekend stuff when you're an adult with actual friends. I'd been looking forward to this for weeks. Work had been brutal. Back-to-back commercial jobs, long hours, difficult clients. Having people over felt like getting back to normal life instead of constantly walking on eggshells in my own house. We're sitting around talking shop when Mike mentions how expensive college is getting. I made some offhand comment about at least having money saved for Ellie's education, assuming she didn't want to go somewhere ridiculous like NYU. Sarah laughed. Smart parent. We started saving when Emma was born, and it's still not enough. The key is starting early and being realistic about expectations, I said, not knowing I was about to get a masterclass in unrealistic expectations. That's when Princess decided to make her grand entrance, phone permanently attached to her hand like a life support device. Actually, I've been accepted to NYU and I'm going. Mom and I already talked about it. News to me. The table went quiet because even my friends could tell this was about to get ugly. Mike shifted uncomfortably. NYU's a great school. Expensive, but great. Congratulations. We'll need to discuss the finances for that. The fund covers state school. She looked at me like I'd just told her the earth was flat. You're seriously going to ruin my future over money? I'm not ruining anything. I'm being realistic about what we can afford. Tony, who'd been nursing his drink and watching this unfold, caught my eye and gave a barely perceptible shake of his head. He could see where this was heading. And that's when she decided to put on a show for our guests. Started ranting about how I'd never treated her like she belonged. How I acted like every dollar I spent was some huge favor. How I should be grateful she wasn't letting us live in poverty. Grateful? Mike's wife looked confused. Shouldn't it be the other way around? But Ellie was just getting warmed up. He's always complaining about money. Always making me feel guilty for needing things. Like, sorry I cost money to raise. Maybe you shouldn't have married someone with a kid if you couldn't handle it. This kid who'd been living rent-free in my house for years, whose every need had been met by my paycheck, was lecturing me about gratitude while I was hosting a dinner party. You should go to your room, I said, my voice deadly calm. Don't tell me what to do. You're not my father. You're just some guy my mom married who thinks money makes him important. The silence that followed was deafening. Years of being her dad, and that's what I was to her. Some guy her mom married. Tony's voice cut through the tension like a knife. Ahem. Anyone wants another drink? I looked at Valerie, waiting for her to say something. Anything. A correction. A reprimand. Hell, even an embarrassed apology to our guests. Instead, she stood up and put her arm around Ellie. She's upset about college stress. Maybe we should call it a night. Not, apologize to the man who raised you. Not, that was completely inappropriate. Just an excuse and a suggestion that our guests leave so her precious daughter wouldn't face consequences for publicly humiliating me in my own home. Mike stood up slowly, clearly uncomfortable. Yeah, we should probably head out. Thanks for dinner. Sarah gave me a sympathetic look as they gathered their things. The burgers were great. We'll talk soon. Tony lingered. Actually, I think I'll stay and help clean up. After my friends left, looking appropriately mortified, I came back to find mother and daughter in the kitchen, whispering like conspirators planning the next phase of their campaign. Well, I said, mind to explain what the fuck just happened in front of my guests? Valerie's response was that Ellie was upset, and college was stressful. When I pointed out that the college she was supposedly attending costs $60,000 a year, and the fund only had $85,000 in it, they suggested taking out loans. We could take out loans. Meaning I could take out loans, since Princess wasn't exactly loan qualified. That's when Valerie showed her true colors. Maybe if you actually treated her like your daughter instead of some charity case, she'd act like it. Charity case. I'd treated this kid better than her own biological father ever had, and my wife's response was to defend her when she called me some guy you married. You're right, I told them both. I am just some guy you married. Because a real father would get respect in his own home. A real father wouldn't have his wife making excuses when his kid publicly humiliates him. Well, if you wanted to control someone, maybe you should have your own kid. Valerie shot back. What followed was complete silence, but the damage was done. They'd made their choice, and I'd made mine. You're right, I simply said, ending the argument. Tony, who'd been quietly cleaning dishes in the background, finally spoke up. You know what's fascinating? I've been here for 3 hours, and not once did I see either of them thank you for the house, the food, the lifestyle, or the 11 years of playing dad. But they sure as shit knew where to stick the knife when they wanted to hurt you. Oh, and that NYU acceptance? Complete bullshit. I checked. She'd been lying about that too, just like she lied about everything else when she wanted something. That night I slept in my office, but I didn't sleep much. I spent most of it planning my exit, because if I was just some guy Valerie married, then some guy Valerie married could just as easily become some guy Valerie used to be married to. The nuclear option wasn't just on the table anymore, it was loaded and ready to launch. Monday morning, I did 3 things that changed everything forever. Moved all my business income to a separate account, called my lawyer, and liquidated Ellie's college fund. All $85,000 of it. Gone. Vanished. Poof. I didn't tell them right away. Let them think everything was normal while I got my ducks in a row. Took about a week to get the paperwork ready and my assets protected. Tony was the only one I told about the plan. His response? About damn time. I was starting to think they'd sucked out your spine along with your bank account. The lawyer was this woman named Janet, who'd handled enough divorce cases to spot the signs immediately. Let me guess, you've been funding everyone's lifestyle while being treated like garbage? When I explained the situation, she nodded like she'd heard it 1,000 times. Classic case. You're the provider, not the partner. Good news is you kept everything in your name. Bad news is you're about to find out how nasty people get when their meal ticket disappears. The first sign something was wrong came when Ellie's car insurance got canceled. She found out the hard way when she got pulled over for speeding, and the cop informed her she was driving uninsured. What the hell happened to my insurance? She demanded when she got home. I stopped paying for it. You can't do that. I need my car. Then get a job and pay for it yourself. Valerie came running from the kitchen, ready to negotiate on behalf of her client. When I explained that I don't pay for things for people who disrespect me, she tried the she needs her car for school argument. She needs a lot of things. A lot. Respect being the main one. Ellie attempted the apologetic approach next, crocodile tears saying she was sorry and didn't mean it. Just stressed about college, you know. Didn't mean those things about me not being her dad. Actually, I think you meant every word. And that's fine. But you can't have it both ways. Either I'm your dad who deserves respect, or I'm just some guy your mom married who doesn't owe you anything. You already picked. The tears dried up real quick when she realized the apology wasn't working. The real meltdown came when they discovered the college fund was empty. I was in the garage working on my truck when I heard the screaming from inside. Ellie had tried to check the balance online and found a big fat zero where $85,000 used to be. She burst into the garage like a banshee. What did you do? I liquidated the account. You can't do that. That's my money. Actually, it was my money. Every deposit came from my business account. The account was in my name. Legally, it was always mine. Full-blown panic attack. The realization that her free ride to college had just evaporated hit her like a freight train. But I was going to use that for school. No, you were going to use it to party at an expensive college you're not even qualified for. Different thing. When Valerie joined the chaos and started screaming about how I was destroying Ellie's future, I handed her the divorce papers I'd been carrying in my back pocket. The silence was beautiful. Valerie stared at those papers like they were written in ancient hieroglyphics. Are you serious? You're divorcing me over this? Yes, I am. You've made it clear that you'll always defend your daughter even when she's wrong. I'm doing us both a favor. She's my child. How could you? And I was your husband, never her father. You both made that clear. Ellie was still having her breakdown about the money, now adding threats about fighting this in court. Good luck with that, sweetheart. Every deposit was documented. Every penny came from my business, and the account was always in my name as custodian. The reality started sinking in fast. They'd gone from comfortable middle-class life to struggling single mother and daughter in the span of 10 minutes. When Valerie asked what they were supposed to do, how they'd survive, I gave her the honest answer. Same way millions of other single mothers do it. You'll figure it out. They tried everything after that. Promises of changed behavior, threats of legal action, guilt trips about abandoning family. None of it worked because none of it was sincere. The papers were served the next day. 11 years of marriage and 13 years of playing dad to an ungrateful kid were officially over. They had 30 days to find somewhere else to live. The eviction countdown had begun, and I was finally done being the guy everyone took for granted. The first few months after they moved out were weird. I'd come home to complete silence. No teenage drama, no demands for money, no walking on eggshells around anyone's feelings. Just pure, blessed peace. It took time to adjust. 13 years of constant chaos doesn't just disappear overnight. I'd catch myself listening for footsteps upstairs or waiting for someone to ask me for something. But slowly, I started remembering what it felt like to actually live in my own space instead of just paying for it. The house felt bigger somehow. Turned Ellie's old room into a proper home office, got rid of furniture that reminded me of them, basically reclaimed every inch of the place. New paint, new carpet, new everything. It was like exorcising ghosts. Business was better than ever. Amazing how much wealth you can build when you're not bleeding money on other people's expensive tastes and imaginary college funds. The stress of constantly arguing about money just disappeared. You know what the best part about this whole situation is? Tony said one day while we were installing a new water heater. You finally remembered you have balls. I was starting to think they'd moved in with your backbone. About 2 months in, I got a text from Sandra, one of Valerie's old friends. The quiet one who always seemed to be observing more than participating in their social circle. Hey, I heard about the divorce. Just wanted to say I'm sorry you went through that. You don't deserve it, really. I almost didn't respond. The last thing I needed was getting dragged into Valerie's drama through her friends. But something about the message seemed genuine, so I thanked her. I know we don't really know each other, but if you ever want to grab coffee and talk to someone who's not involved in the situation, let me know. We met for coffee the next week. Nothing romantic, just two adults having a normal conversation. She asked how I was holding up, seemed genuinely interested in my answer. Didn't pry for gossip or try to get me to talk shit about my ex. I watched that whole situation for years, she said eventually. You tried so hard to make it work. They just couldn't see what they had. First time since the divorce that someone acknowledged what I'd actually been dealing with. Not taking sides, not making excuses, just seeing the reality of the situation. Coffee turned into dinner turned into movies, and eventually we were spending serious time together. But we took it slow. I wasn't ready to jump into anything serious, and she understood that completely. I'm not going anywhere, she said, when I explained my hesitation about relationships. Take all the time you need to figure out what you want. Through Sandra, I heard bits and pieces about how Valerie and Ellie were adjusting to reality. They'd moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment across town, splitting $1,200 rent and arguing about grocery money. Valerie was working full-time now. Ellie was working part-time at Target while trying to figure out community college. The adjustment was apparently brutal. They'd gone from a comfortable house with all bills paid to the harsh reality of actual budgeting. Turns out, when you're not living off someone else's generosity, money gets tight real quick. Valerie keeps asking if I think you'll change your mind about the college fund, Sandra told me one night. She seems to think this is all some elaborate lesson, and you'll eventually give them the money back. Not happening. That ship has sailed, hit an iceberg, and sunk to the bottom of the ocean. About 6 months in, Sandra mentioned that Ellie had tried reaching out to her biological father for college money. Guy had apparently laughed and hung up on her. The best part? I was genuinely happy. Not just relieved to be out of a bad situation, but actually happy. Sandra was everything Valerie wasn't. Supportive, appreciative, settled. She had her own job, her own place, her own money. Revolutionary concept. When she finally moved in with me almost a year later, it was because we wanted to build something together, not because she needed somewhere to live. She contributed to expenses, helped with home improvements, treated my space like ours instead of hers to redecorate. And the respect? She valued my opinion, supported my decisions, actually seemed to enjoy having me around. We got engaged 2 years after the divorce was final. Simple proposal, nothing dramatic. Just two adults who'd found something real and wanted to make it official. Tony liked her, and he was happy for me. But the real surprise came when Sandra told me she was pregnant. I'd never thought about having biological kids. After Ellie, I figured my parenting days were behind me. But holding that ultrasound picture, seeing my actual child for the first time, something deep in my chest just opened up. This kid would be mine from day one. No competing loyalties, no reminders about real fathers, no years of building a relationship only to have it thrown in my face. Just pure, uncomplicated love. We got married 6 months before our son was born. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Life was good, really good. And I'd almost forgotten about my old problems entirely, until they decided to remind me they still existed. 5 years after the divorce, I was living the dream. Married to Sandra, father to our 3-year-old son Jake, business thriving, house completely renovated, and feeling like home for the first time in years. I'd built something real, something that belonged to me. Then my doorbell rang on a Sunday morning. Sandra was giving Jake a bath upstairs, and I was enjoying my coffee like a civilized human being when I opened the door to find two women I barely recognized. Valerie looked like she'd aged 15 years instead of 5. Stress lines, gray hair she wasn't bothering to hide, clothes that screamed paycheck to paycheck. Ellie was with her, and the transformation was even more dramatic. Gone was the entitled princess who used to demand designer everything. "We need to talk," Valerie said. "No, we don't," I replied, starting to close the door. "Please, just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I let them in. They sat on the couch Sandra and I had picked out together, looking around at the renovated space like they were visiting a museum of their former life. "The place looks incredible. Really nice renovations. What do you want?" They exchanged glances, clearly having rehearsed this conversation. Ellie's finally ready for college. She's been working and saving for 3 years now, really getting her life together. She just needs some help with tuition for the state school. I almost laughed. Almost. "And you thought I'd be interested in that because you raised her, because she's learned from her mistakes, because you loved her once." I loved a kid who called me dad and appreciated what I did for her. That kid doesn't exist anymore. She never did. Ellie finally spoke up with what was obviously a prepared speech about how terrible she'd been, how she'd said horrible things and treated me like garbage, but how she'd grown up and understood now how much I'd sacrificed. "I know I can't take back what I said that night, about you not being my father. I was angry and stupid, and I hurt you. But I've had 5 years to think about what I lost when I lost you." The words sounded rehearsed, but there was something in her voice that suggested actual regret. The problem was, too little, too late. "Good for you. What's that have to do with me?" Then came the real reason for the visit. Valerie had lost her job last month. They were 3 months behind on rent. Eviction was imminent. Her biological father wouldn't help. Of course. "That sounds like a you problem." That's when I heard small footsteps on the stairs. Jake came running into the living room, freshly bathed and in his pajamas, launching himself at me with the kind of pure joy that still knocked me over every time. "Daddy!" I scooped him up, and he immediately started babbling about the toy truck he'd been playing with upstairs. This kid who saw me as the center of his universe, who trusted me completely, who would never question whether he belonged in my life. "That's your son," Valerie said. "Yes, he is." Sandra appeared at the top of the stairs, and when she saw who was in our living room, her expression shifted to something between surprise and anger. The tension ratcheted up immediately. Sandra moved to stand beside me, putting her hand on Jake's back in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. "They were just leaving," I said. "Actually, we weren't done talking." "Yeah, you were," Sandra said firmly. "This is our home, our family time. Whatever you want from my husband, the answer is no." I'd never heard Sandra use that tone before. Pure steel wrapped in politeness. The same voice she probably used with difficult clients who thought they could walk all over her. "Your husband?" Valerie's mask slipped completely. "I was married to him for 11 years. I built a partnership with him. You built a dictatorship where he paid for everything and got nothing in return. You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about. I watched you take him for granted for years. I watched your daughter treat him like garbage while he kept trying to earn love from people who never intended to give it." When Ellie tried to defend how things used to be, Sandra cut her off. "When's the last time you called him dad? When's the last time you acted grateful for anything he did?" Silence. Beautiful, telling silence. Valerie was getting desperate now, talking about family and history, and how I couldn't just throw that away. "Watch me," I said, echoing the words I'd used 5 years earlier. But then she crossed a line. "You have a son now? Don't you want him to learn about forgiveness? About helping family?" That's when I really lost it. "Don't you ever use my son to manipulate me. He's going to learn that respect is earned, not owed. And he's sure as hell going to learn that you don't reward people who treat you like shit." Sandra stepped forward. "You need to leave. Now." My phone buzzed with a text from Tony, who was apparently driving by. "Saw some beat-up Honda in your driveway. Either you've downgraded your taste in cars, or your past is haunting you. Need backup or an alibi?" As they walked to their beat-up car, the same Honda I'd bought Ellie for her 16th birthday, now held together with duct tape and hope, I could hear Valerie talking angrily to Ellie about that bitch and how I'd changed. I hadn't changed. I'd just finally learned my worth. I texted Tony back, past equals exercised. Alibis. Unnecessary. Thanks for having my six. His response. Good. Now get back to your real family and stop letting ghosts ruin your Sunday. That night, after Jake was asleep, Sandra and I sat on our back deck with a drink. You okay? She asked. Better than okay. Got reminded why I made all the right choices. She leaned against me. Your son is lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have both of you. Looking at what I'd built, a wife who respected me, a son who adored me, a business that was thriving, a home that actually felt like home. I couldn't imagine going back to that old life. Some people come into your life to drain you. Others come to fulfill you. I'd finally learned the difference. And I was never going back. Story 5. This story is titled, My Sister's Lies. Ruined my life and my family disowned me. Now they want me back. Years later, hey everyone. Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Man, I've been staring at this blank screen for like an hour trying to figure out how to start. I guess I should just get into it. This is pretty heavy stuff, and it's taken me years to be ready to write it all down. So, yeah, I'm Eric, 33 male now, and this story is about how my sister, I'll call her Anne, completely destroyed my life with a lie, and what happened after that. But to understand everything, you gotta know what things were like before it all went bad. Growing up, Anne and I were super close. Like, probably closer than most brothers and sisters. Even with the 4-year age gap, we were basically best friends. I know that sounds weird now, given everything that happened, but back then it was just normal, you know? I was never the smart kid in school, always struggled with grades, barely passed most classes, but I was really into electronics. Not like programming or computers, more like taking things apart and putting them back together. Started with old TV remotes and radios I'd find at yard sale. By the time I was 16, I had this whole setup in my room. Soldering iron, multimeters, boxes full of circuit boards and wires. My parents thought it was weird, especially since I'd spend hours in there with the door locked. Yeah, that becomes important later. But Anne, she got it. She was like 10 when I started getting serious about it, and she'd just sit in my room for hours, watching me work. She'd ask all these questions about what different parts did, why I was connecting certain wires, that kind of thing. Sometimes she'd help me organize my parts or hold stuff while I soldered. It was our thing, you know? Our parents definitely played favorites, though. Anne was this perfect kid. Straight A's, gymnastics team, student council, the whole package. Meanwhile, I was barely passing classes and spending all my time either in my room with electronics or at the skate park. But Anne always had my back. Like this one time in my junior year, I got caught smoking behind the gym. Instead of letting me get suspended, Anne made up this whole story about how I was just holding the cigarette for someone else who ran away. Even did the whole crying thing to the principal about how I was trying to turn my life around and a suspension would ruin everything. The principal totally bought it. She helped me with homework too. She was way better at explaining stuff than my teachers. Like she'd break down math problems in a way that actually made sense to me. Probably the only reason I graduated high school TBH. I looked out for her too. Being the big brother, I was pretty protective. Maybe too protective looking back. Any guy who showed interest in her had to deal with me first. I wasn't trying to be a jerk about it, just didn't want some random dudes messing with my little sister. Even when I started getting into trouble, staying out late, hanging with the wrong crowd, Anne never judged me. She'd cover for me with our parents, make excuses when I missed curfew. One time I came home at 3 a.m. and she was sitting on the porch waiting for me. Just wanted to make sure I got home safe. Looking back now, maybe we were too close. Maybe that's why it was so easy for people to believe what she said later. But back then, it just felt normal. She was my sister, my best friend, the only person who really got me. Our parents tried to get me interested in normal stuff. They'd sign me up for sports teams or after-school clubs, but I always went back to my electronics. They thought I was wasting my time, but Anne would defend me. He's good at it, she'd say. Let him do what he loves. That's the Anne I try to remember sometimes. The little sister who believed in me when nobody else did. The one who'd bring me snacks while I was working on projects. Who'd defend me to our parents. Who trusted me enough to come to me with her problems. Fuck, this is harder to write than I thought it would be. When everything started falling apart, I was 18, just barely graduated high school. Anne was 16 and starting to get attention from guys at her school. Being the overprotective brother I was, I did what any big brother would do. Scared them off. Not like I was beating anyone up, just made sure they knew I was watching. There was this one guy, Jake, who was particularly persistent. Senior guy, driving a fancy car his parents bought him. Typical rich kid stuff. Caught him trying to get Anne to skip class with him one day. I probably shouldn't have shoved him against his car, but come on. He was 18 trying to get my 16-year-old sister to skip school. What brother wouldn't be pissed? That's when the rumors started. At first, it was just whispers. People at Anne's school saying stuff about how weird it was that I was so protective. Then it got worse. Someone started saying the reason I didn't want other guys near Anne was because I wanted her for myself. Sick stuff like that. I remember the exact moment I realized something was really wrong. It was a Tuesday after school. Usually, Anne would come to my room to hang out while I worked on my projects, but this time, she just went straight to her room. When I knocked on her door to check on her, she told me to go away. Found her crying in the kitchen later that night. When I tried to hug her like I always did when she was upset, she flinched. Actually flinched away from me. That had never happened before. She mumbled something about being tired and went back to her room. The next few days were weird. She stopped coming to my room. Stopped talking to me at all, really. I figured she was just going through some teenage phase or something. Should have known better. Then one morning, I'm working on this old radio I'd found, and I hear someone knocking on our front door. Not like normal knocking, that loud, official kind of knock that immediately makes your stomach drop. 2 cops and some lady in a suit were standing there when my dad opened the door. They asked to speak with him privately first. I could hear them talking in the kitchen, but couldn't make out what they were saying. Then my dad called me down. I'll never forget the look on his face, like he was looking at a stranger. The lady in the suit introduced herself as being from CPS. Said they needed to ask me some questions about my relationship with Anne. Turns out Anne had gone to her guidance counselor and told them I'd been, this is still hard to write. Told them I'd been touching her inappropriately. Said that's why I was always in my room with the door locked. That I made her come in there and, yeah, you can figure out the rest. She told them I'd threatened to hurt her if she ever told anyone. Said that's why I was so aggressive with guys who showed interest in her. Even said I used the electronic stuff as a cover. That the wires and zip ties in my room were for other things. My dad didn't even question it. Not once. Just stood there nodding as they talked, like suddenly everything made sense to him. All those hours in my room, the locked door, the protectiveness over Anne. In his mind, it all added up to something sick. I tried to explain. Showed them my projects, the half-fixed radio on my desk, the boxes of circuit boards and old electronics. Tried to tell them about how Anne used to sit and watch me work, how she'd help me organize parts. But they'd already made up their minds. The CPS lady kept asking these leading questions. Did you make Anne feel special by letting her help you? Did you tell her she was different from other girls? Everything I said just made it sound worse. When they asked about the time I pushed Jake, Anne had twisted that too. Said I was jealous because she was starting to like other guys. That I couldn't handle her growing up and having normal relationships because it meant losing control over her. The worst part? She had this whole story about how I'd started getting more aggressive lately because she was pulling away from me. How I'd told her she was betraying me by talking to other guys. None of it was true, but the way she told it, even I almost believed. And then I lost it. Right there in front of everyone. Anne, what the hell are you saying? My voice cracked, not from anger, but from sheer disbelief. She wouldn't look at me. Anne, look at me. She kept her eyes on the floor, arms wrapped around herself like she was some fragile little thing that needed protection. That little act just made me angrier. You know this isn't true. You know it. I turned to our dad, desperate. Dad, come on. You know me. I would never... Stop. His voice was low, steady, but his face, I'd never seen him look at me like that before. Not disappointed, not angry, just done. You don't even want to hear me out? I took a step forward, but he put his hand up like I was some kind of threat. Anne flinched. She flinched. That was it. That was when I knew. You can't seriously believe this. My voice dropped. All the fight suddenly drained out of me. I looked at Anne again. Really looked at her. She still wouldn't meet my eyes. Why are you doing this? I whispered. She finally looked up. She was going to say something. Maybe even take it all back. But then she glanced at Dad, at the CPS lady, at the cop standing in our living room. And that's when she doubled down. Her eyes filled with tears. She took a shaky breath and whispered, I'm sorry, Eric. And right then, I understood. She wasn't going to take it back. Because it was too late. Because she was in too deep. Because she was scared of the consequences. I laughed. Actually laughed. Wow, I said. You're really doing this. You're actually doing this. Anne squeezed her arms around herself tighter. I just couldn't keep it in anymore. Dad clenched his jaw. Get your things. We're going to the station. And that was it. No trial. No evidence. No real questions. Just my dad driving me to the police station in silence, like I was already guilty. Like I was a stranger. Like I wasn't his son anymore. On the way to the police station, all I could think about was how they made it all fit. The lonely older brother who spent all his time alone in his room. The weird hobby with all the tools and wires. The aggressive protectiveness. The close relationship that suddenly turned bad. They saw exactly what they wanted to see. The interview room at the police station was exactly like you see in movies. They left me sitting there for what felt like hours before two detectives came in. The male detective, Rivers, played good cop, kept saying stuff like, "We just want to understand what happened, Eric. Help us help you." The female detective, don't remember her name, just sat there taking notes and giving me these looks like I was dirt. Rivers started going through my electronics hobby. "Tell me about the things you build," he said, trying to sound interested. So I explained about fixing old radios, building simple circuits, basic stuff. "And Anne would help you with these projects?" "Yeah, she'd organize parts, hold stuff while I soldered. She liked learning about it." The female detective cut in. "So you'd have her alone in your room, door locked, handling your equipment?" That's when it hit me how they were twisting everything. Every normal thing suddenly sounded wrong. They kept pushing about the locked door. "I locked it because I had expensive tools," I tried explaining. "Dad would borrow stuff and not put it back." "Or maybe," Rivers said, his voice getting harder, "you locked it for other reasons." They had this whole file of evidence. Anne's statement about how I'd started touching her when she was 12, right when she started getting interested in my projects. How I used the electronics as a way to isolate her. Made her feel special by teaching her things no one else knew. I said, "That's insane. She's my sister. I was teaching her because she was interested." The female detective leaned forward. Interested in electronics? Or afraid of what would happen if she wasn't? Then they brought up the Jake incident. But in their version, I'd attacked him because he was taking Anne away from me. They had statements from other kids at school about how possessive I was, how I'd scared away any guy who came near her. Rivers pulled out some photos. My room, taken that morning. They'd made it look like some kind of torture chamber. Close-ups of my tools, the wires, the zip ties I used for cable management. Even my project notes looked sinister in their photos. "Your father says you'd spend hours alone with Anne in this room," Rivers said. "Want to tell us what really happened in there?" I lost it. Started yelling about how they were making normal brother-sister stuff sound perverted. Bad move. Rivers just nodded like I'd confirmed something. "Classic defensive reaction," he said to his partner. Then they brought up my grades, my lack of friends, the hours alone in my room. Built this whole profile of an isolated, unstable guy obsessed with his... They weren't just investigating, they were building a case. And the more I denied it, the more guilty I looked. My lawyer, if you could even call her that, barely fought back. "We need to consider a plea deal," she told me, as if it was my only option. "If this goes to trial, you could be facing 20 years in prison." After hours of this, Rivers finally said, "Look, Eric, here's the deal. We have enough for charges. Serious charges. But if you work with us, admit what happened and show remorse, we can help you." "I didn't do anything wrong," I said for probably the 100th time. "Then explain why Anne would make this up." I couldn't, because it didn't make sense. My sister, who I'd protected and cared for, who used to wait up to make sure I got home safe. Why would she do this? The next part is kind of a blur. There were meetings with lawyers. My parents had hired one for Anne, but told me I had to find my own. The public defender they gave me was fresh out of law school and already convinced I was guilty. She told me my option. I could fight it, but she made it clear that winning wasn't likely. "Juries believe victims," she said flatly. "And Anne is young, emotional, and convincing." She laid out the reality. If I went to trial, I was facing a potential 20 years in prison. The plea deal was mercy, 5 years probation, lifetime registry, but no jail. "If you take this to trial and lose," she warned, "you won't get another chance." My own parents weren't even in my corner. Dad just shook his head. "Don't put your sister through a trial," he said. "Just take the deal." "But I'm innocent," I said. "They all say that," she replied, without looking up from her papers. "They have your sister's testimony, documentation of behavioral changes, witness statements about your possessive behavior. No jury will believe you over a traumatized 16-year-old girl." My dad came to see me once before I took the deal. Hadn't seen him since he'd dropped me at the station. I thought maybe he'd finally realized the truth. Instead, he said, "Just admit what you did, Eric. Don't make your sister go through a trial." "Dad, please," I begged. "You know me. You know I'd never..." He cut me off. "I thought I knew you. Guess I didn't." That was the last real conversation I had with my father. 2 days later, I took the deal. Pled no contest to sexual assault of a minor. Got 5 years probation and a lifetime on the registry. Some of you might wonder why I'd plead if I was innocent. Truth is, they break you. They take every normal thing about your life and twist it until you can't even trust your own memory. And when everyone, your family, the cops, even your own lawyer, believes you're guilty, you start thinking maybe fighting is pointless. Being on the list destroys your life in ways you'd never expect. Everyone talks about the big stuff. Can't live near schools, can't get certain jobs, etc. But it's the small things that really get to you. First place I tried to rent after everything? Lady was all set to let me sign the lease. Then she did the background check. I still remember her face when she saw what came up. She actually backed away from me like I was going to attack her right there in her office. "I'm sorry," she said. "I have grandchildren who visit. I'm sure you understand." That became my life. People being sorry while treating me like some kind of monster. And finding work was a nightmare. Most places wouldn't even look at my application once they saw I had to check that box. The few interviews I did get usually ended the same way. "We'll call you." They never did. Finally found this guy, Mike, who ran a small manufacturing. He hired people others wouldn't. Ex-cons, addicts trying to get clean. Guys like me. Pay was garbage and the work was hard. But at least it was something. "Look," Mike told me my first day, "I don't care what you did. Just show up on time and do your job." Worked there for almost 2 years. Then someone found out about me and started causing problems, telling other workers they shouldn't have to work with someone like me, that I was dangerous. Mike tried to stand up for me, but eventually he had to let me go. "Can't risk losing my whole workforce," he said. At least he gave me decent severance pay. Lost my apartment right after that. Ended up living in my car for a while. Planet Fitness membership became my best friend. $10 a month for a place to shower and use the bathroom. Would park in 24-hour Walmart lots to sleep. Security usually left you alone if you didn't cause trouble. The worst part wasn't even the practical stuff, though. It was watching life go on without me. Through mutual friends on Facebook, before they banned me, I saw Anne graduating high school with honors, going to college on a full scholarship, meeting this rich guy Billy at some campus event. Meanwhile, I was eating cold ravioli from a can in my car, trying to figure out where I could park for the night without getting hassled by cops. Made the mistake of trying to date once. Met this girl Sarah at one of my jobs. She was nice, didn't ask too many questions about my past. We went out a few times. Things were going good. Then she asked why I always had to check the address of wherever we were going. I decided to be honest, told her about the registration requirement, how I had to be careful about where I went. Tried to explain that I was innocent, that it was a false accusation. She said she needed time to think. Next day, her brother and 2 of his friends showed up at my work. Had to quit that job too. Started hanging out at this little library branch after that. Librarian there, she kind of figured out my situation but never said anything. Would just leave books she thought I'd like on the returns cart. Lot of technical manuals, electronics books. Guess she'd noticed what I usually read. One day she caught me looking at online courses, sat down and helped me find free ones I could take. "Education is everyone's right," she said. Only person who treated me like a human being in years. Started learning about cryptocurrency through those courses. Figured it was something I could do without anyone checking my background. Turned out I had a knack for understanding the technical side of it. Made a little money here and there trading. But you know what really messed me up? Seeing comments on Anne's social media. All these people talking about how brave she was, how amazing it was that she'd overcome her trauma to be so successful. She even wrote this article for her college paper about being a survivor. People were calling her an inspiration. Meanwhile, I was barely surviving. Funny how that works, right? Used to think about trying to clear my name. But who would believe me? Anne was this perfect, successful college student. I was just some creep living in his car. The system doesn't care about people like me. That's how I spent most of my 20s. Moving from job to job, place to place. Never staying anywhere long enough for people to find out about me. Never making friends because what's the point when they'll just leave once they know? Some nights I'd lay in my car looking at old family photos on my phone. Pictures of me and Anne when we were kids, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. What I could have done differently. That's the thing about being on the list. It doesn't just take away your freedom. It takes away your past, your future, your whole identity. You stop being a person and become a label. But suddenly, everything changed. It was just a normal Tuesday. I was at work, found another factory job, better than the last one, when I got this email from some private investigator. Almost deleted it thinking it was spam, but something made me read it. The PI said he'd been hired by Anne's husband Billy to look into her past. Guess she'd been acting weird lately, and Billy started digging. The PI had found inconsistency in her story about me and wanted to talk. I ignored it at first. Had enough people mess with my life already. But then he sent another email with proof he was legit. Court documents, case files, stuff I'd never seen before. We met at this diner just outside town. The PI, I'll call him Frank, had this massive folder of documents. "Your sister's story is falling apart," he said, spreading papers across the table. "Been doing this job 30 years. Never seen someone mess up their own lie this bad." Turns out Anne had been sloppy, really sloppy. The timeline she gave about when stuff supposedly happened didn't match school records. The witness statements from her friends, they changed every time she told the story. But what completely blindsided me was this. Remember Jake, the senior who kept hitting on her? Turns out, he wasn't just some guy sniffing around. Anne had been secretly dating him. And not just that. She got caught in his car, doing things she definitely wasn't supposed to be doing. She was convinced I was going to tell our parents about it, Maybe because she knew I'd always been protective, or maybe just out of pure panic. Either way, she needed a distraction. Something big enough, shocking enough, to make sure no one even thought about Jake. So she made up the accusations, knowing that once those words were out, nothing else would matter. Frank had texts between Anne and her friends from back then. Screenshots she thought were deleted. In them, she literally planned the whole thing. Talked about how she needed a nuclear option to keep me quiet. She didn't expect it to go as far as it did, Frank said. Reading these messages seems like she thought they'd just send you away to live with relatives or something. When your dad went full scorched earth, she was too scared to take it back. I just sat there reading through everything, seeing proof of what I'd known all along. Frank kept talking. Billy hired me because she's been acting strange lately, drinking too much, getting paranoid. He found her crying over old family photos one night. When he asked about you, she completely shut down. That's when he called me. Then Frank pulled out one last document, a signed confession from Anne. Billy had confronted her with all the evidence, and she broke down and told him everything. I need you to understand something, Frank said. This isn't going to magically fix everything. The legal system doesn't like admitting it made a mistake, but it's a start. He left me with copies of everything. Spent that whole night reading through it all. The text where she planned it. The confession where she finally admitted the truth. Even found some posts she'd made on some forum asking how to make abuse allegations more believable. The next day I called a lawyer. A real one this time. Not some overworked public defender who had already decided I was guilty. We filed for post-conviction relief based on new evidence. My lawyer said Anne's confession, combined with the discrepancies Frank uncovered, was strong enough to vacate my conviction and get me removed from the registry. It took months of hearings, but eventually, a judge ruled in my favor. My record was wiped clean. I should have felt relief. I should have felt something. But all I could think about was how long it had taken, how much I had lost in the process. A week later, an envelope landed in my mailbox. No return address, but I knew who it was from before I even opened it. My parents. The first contact in 10 years. My hands shook as I tore it open, not from excitement, just sheer disbelief. Inside was a letter, written in my dad's stiff, impersonal handwriting. They wanted to meet, said Anne had finally come clean. Well, partially. She spun some watered-down version of the truth, painting herself as a scared little girl who made a terrible mistake. No mention of the calculated lies, the years of suffering she put me through. But apparently it was enough for them to finally believe I was innocent. Tucked inside the envelope was a check, $50,000, a number that probably felt generous to them, like it could somehow erase a decade of being treated like a monster, like it could buy back my stolen years, my dignity, my life. I held it up to the light for a second, then laughed. Nothing had changed. They still thought problems could be solved with a price tag. Money wasn't what I needed. I needed the truth to be known, and I needed to hear it from someone else's mouth. So I took the number from Frank and called him. My hands were shaking when I finally dialed. He answered after a few rings, his voice wary. Billy, this is Eric. There was a long pause. Then cautiously, Eric who? I let that sting for a second before answering. Anne's brother. Silence. Then a low, humorless chuckle. That's funny, because Anne never mentioned having a brother. Never mentioned any family, actually. I swallowed down the immediate anger rising in my chest. Yeah, that tracks. Can't have the skeletons in her closet running their mouths, right? Billy exhaled sharply. Jesus. I knew she was hiding things, but this? I've been married to this woman for years, had a kid with her, and I didn't even know she had a brother? Not one she didn't completely destroy first, I said flatly. There was another pause before he muttered, unbelievable. His voice had that tight, realizing just how deep they'd been played. Then he sighed, and when he spoke again, his voice was firm. Final. I'm filing for divorce. I didn't say anything at first, just let the weight of his words settle between us. Then finally I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Good, I said. You deserve better. I hung up after that. No point in saying anything else. But as I set my phone down, a strange sense of relief washed over me. Then I found the social media posts. Anne deactivated all her accounts, but not before posting this long apology about how she'd remembered things wrong as a teenager. Made herself sound like the victim somehow. Poor confused girl who made a mistake, now bravely coming forward with the truth. Her perfect life started falling apart after that. Billy filed for divorce. The school where she worked, yeah, she became a teacher, imagine that, asked her to resign. Turns out they don't like having teachers who've admitted to making false abuse allegations. Found out later that Billy got full custody of their kid. Used Anne's confession to prove she was unstable. She tried to fight it, but Frank's investigation had uncovered other lies too. Lots of them. The real truth? She'd been lying about everything for years. Not just about me. Made up stories about other people too. Had this whole pattern of accusing guys of stuff when things didn't go her way. Some people asked why she finally confessed. According to Frank, My parents had started noticing things. Anne had been acting erratic for months, disappearing for hours without explanation, having sudden outbursts over nothing, drinking too much at family gatherings. But the final straw came when she slipped up. That was during a heated argument with my mom. She blurted something out. Something about how Eric wouldn't have suffered if Dad hadn't overreacted. My mom froze, pressed her for details. Anne tried to backtrack, but it was too late. The doubt had already been planted. My dad, ever the controlling figure, started digging. He reached out to people from Anne's past, even called her old high school friends. And just like that, the cracks in her story started showing. By the time Billy hired Frank, Anne was already spiraling, trying to patch together a lie that was quickly falling apart. So when Billy confronted her with the evidence, the texts, the inconsistencies, the proof she thought was long buried, she broke. And that's when my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was shaky, like she had been crying for hours. "Eric, please, we need to talk." I almost hung up right then. But something in her tone kept me on the line. She started rambling about Anne, about how she had finally told them her side of things, how she admitted she had made some mistakes but that she had been young, scared, confused. "She's not the same person anymore," my mother insisted. "She's broken, Eric. She cries every day. She knows she ruined your life, and she can barely live with herself." Then they actually asked, "Can't you just forgive her?" That made my blood boil. Forgive? If she had borrowed my car and crashed it, as if she had stolen some money from me, as if she hadn't stripped away my entire life, left me in ruins while she got to move on and play the victim for years. "You don't understand," my mom continued. "She's suffering now too." That was the moment I decided to meet them. Not for closure, not to rebuild some broken family bond. I wanted them to know exactly what they did to me. "Fine," I said. "Let's meet." But I already knew how it was going to end. We met at this restaurant halfway between our cities. Mom started crying as soon as she saw me. Dad just sat there looking old and broken. "Guess having your golden child turn out to be a liar does that to you?" Mom tried to hug me. I stepped back. "Let's just sit down," I said. They had this whole speech prepared about how sorry they were, how they should have believed me, how they wanted to rebuild our family. Dad even pulled out his checkbook again, like throwing money at it would fix everything. "Put that away," I told him. "I didn't come here for your money." Mom kept saying stuff like, "We were just trying to protect your sister, and we did what we thought was right at the time," making excuses, like always. I let them talk themselves out. Then I pulled out the folder Frank gave me, started reading Anne's texts out loud, the ones where she planned the whole thing. Watched their faces as they realized just how badly their precious daughter had played them. "She was scared," Mom tried to defend her. "She was just a child. I was barely an adult," I said. "Where was my protection? Where was my benefit of the doubt?" Dad tried next. "Son, we know we messed up. We want to make it right." "Make it right?" I laughed. "You want to make it right? Can you give me back my 20s? Can you undo the registry? The jobs I lost? The people who treated me like garbage?" They just sat there, finally running out of excuses. I told them everything then. About living in my car, showering at Planet Fitness, eating cold food because I couldn't afford a place with a kitchen. Showed them the scars on my wrists from my lowest point. Mom threw up in the restaurant bathroom. For the first time in years, my parents were finally forced to sit with the truth. The undeniable proof that they had thrown away their own son without hesitation, that their golden child wasn't golden at all. I watched them sit there in stunned silence, their entire world crumbling in real time. "You did this," I said, voice steady. "You let it happen." My father looked like he wanted to argue, like he wanted to defend himself, but for once he didn't. He just stared at the table, jaw clenched. Mom, though, she still tried. "Eric, we were just trying to protect her. We thought we were doing the right thing." I leaned back, letting out a slow breath. "You know what the worst part is? I get that. I do. If I actually was some kind of monster, you would have been doing what any decent parents should do. But you never even gave me a chance. Not once. You decided I was guilty because it was easier than questioning Anne. And you let me rot for it." Tears streamed down her face. "We were wrong," she whispered. "We were so wrong." I let that sit for a moment. Because yeah, they were wrong. They were more than wrong. But nothing they said could ever undo what I had lost. The 10 years of my life where I wasn't a person, just a label. Mom reached across the table, her hand shaking. "Please, Eric, we can't change the past, but we're still your parents. Can we at least try to fix this?" I pulled my hand back before she could touch me. "Fix it," I scoffed. "Tell me, Mom, how exactly do you fix 10 years? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Dad finally spoke. "You have every right to hate us." His voice was hoarse, aged. "But we're still your family." I shook my head. "Number you stopped being my family the moment you decided I wasn't worth fighting for." A heavy silence settled between us. They had expected anger, maybe even screaming. But I was past all of that. I didn't need to yell. They were drowning in their own guilt without me saying another word. Then, Mom played her last card. Anne is suffering too, Eric. I stared at her. Of course she would say that. She lost everything, she continued. Her marriage, her career, her friends. She deserved to, I cut in, voice cold. Mom recoiled like I had slapped her. She made a choice, I said, leveling my gaze at them both. She lied, and I paid the price. But you, I looked directly at my father, who flinched under my stare. You made a choice too. You believed her without a second thought. You let them take me without hesitation. Dad shut his eyes for a moment, as if he could block out the truth. Mom's voice was barely above a whisper. She's not the same person anymore. I let out a dry chuckle. Neither am I. And that was the real tragedy, wasn't it? The person they had known, the boy who spent hours in his room fixing radios, who would have done anything for his little sister, he was gone. They had buried him a decade ago when they let the cops take me away. I grabbed the check my father had put on the table earlier, $50,000, a number they had probably pulled out of thin air, thinking money could erase what they had done. I stared at it for a second, then ripped it in half. I don't need your money, I said. I don't need anything from you. Mom started sobbing. Dad said nothing. He just sat there, like a man finally realizing he had lost something he could never get back. I stood up. You made your choice, I said quietly. Now you get to live with it. I walked out without looking back. I didn't feel anything when I left that restaurant. No rush of victory, no weight off my shoulders, just nothing. And maybe that was the real close. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, but I knew who it was from before I even opened it. It was from Anne. I stared at the envelope for a long time before finally opening it. The letter inside was short. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. That was it. No excuses, no explanation, just that. I held it for a moment, then set it down, and I never wrote back. And yeah, life didn't magically become perfect after that. The damage had been done, and I would always carry the scars of those 10 years. But I was finally free, really free. With my record expunged, I could finally live without the weight of my past hanging over me. I moved to a new city, started fresh, built up my electronics repair business from the ground up, and I never looked back. Anne, my parents, all of it. They became ghosts of a life I had left behind. Maybe one day I'd think about them and feel something. But for now, I was finally living my life on my own terms, and that was enough. Story 6. My wife tossed me divorce papers on Christmas. Then her parents cheered finally. But when she opened my gift, her smirk disappeared, because inside she found this. All right, Reddit. My wife served me divorce papers at Christmas dinner thinking she's humiliating me, but it backfired when she opened my gift. This is going to be a long ride, but trust me, it's worth it. Before I get to the Christmas Day bomb, let me paint you a picture of how this whole shit show started. 8 years ago, I, 32 male, thought I had life figured out. Fresh out of trade school, making decent money as an electrician, had my whole blueprint mapped out. Build the business, find a good woman, buy a house, maybe some kids. Simple plan for a simple guy. Met Shay, 31 male, at my buddy's barbecue. She was that girl. You know the type. Blonde, smart, had this laugh that made you want to tell jokes just to hear it again. Marketing degree, working on her master's in psychology. The first date was supposed to be drinks. Turned into one of those all-night conversations where you solve the world's problems and realize you've got something real. She made me feel like the most interesting guy in the room. Fast forward 2 years, we're living together. Everything's perfect. I'm busting my ass building my electrical contracting business. She's finishing school. Classic partnership. I handle the real world. She makes everything fun. Year 3, I proposed. Did the whole thing right. Ring she'd been hinting about. Romantic dinner at the place we met. She cried, said yes, and posted it everywhere. Her family had opinions about their college princess marrying a tradesman, but Shay shut that down quick. Told them I was building something real while guys her age were still figuring out which video game to play. Wedding was year 4. Big church ceremony. Reception at some country club her parents picked. This is where Justin enters the story. He's married to Shay's sister Sloane, and he was in the wedding party. Quick time out about Justin. Picture every douchebag from business school who thinks he's the next Elon Musk. Always talking about his revolutionary startup, drives a BMW he can barely afford, wears those designer sneakers that cost more than most people's rent, calls everyone chief, and has crypto opinions nobody asked for. But he's family, so I played nice. Years 5 through 7 were the golden age. Bought our dream house, nice colonial with the white picket fence fantasy. Business was booming. I had 8 guys working for me. Clients were lining up. Put Shay through grad school debt-free, paid for her car, her trips with the girls, Even started doing free electrical work for her parents because you're so handy. Every Sunday was family dinner at her parents' place. Same dining room where everything would eventually explode. I'd listen to her dad's political rants, her mom's neighbor gossip, watch Justin show up with Sloane and their kids to play perfect family man. Looking back, I can see the signs. How her face lit up when Justin walked in. How she laughed too hard at his weak jokes. How she always found excuses to help in the kitchen when he was around. But I was focused on our future. Working 60-hour weeks, growing the business, being the provider. Thought I was building something solid. Turns out I was just funding my wife's midlife crisis. Year 8, things started feeling off. Nothing obvious. Just this weird vibe. Shay became distant, critical. Started saying I worked too much. Didn't appreciate what I had. Maybe we needed to explore what we really wanted. I figured it was normal marriage stuff. Every couple hits rough patches. Maybe we needed a vacation or counseling. The irony's killing me. 6 months before Christmas, the universe started sending me warning signs with all the subtlety of a brick through a window. Problem was, I was still living in the fantasy where my wife actually loved me. First sign, the phone situation. For 7 years, Shay's phone was community property. She'd toss it to me for photos, leave it on the counter charging, never cared if I saw her texts. We knew each other's passwords because that's what married people do. Then boom, passcode city. Since when do you have a lock on your phone? I asked one morning. Can a woman have some privacy? Real defensive, real quick. Sure, just seemed random. I'm planning your birthday surprise. Don't want you accidentally seeing anything. My birthday's in April. This was October. But hey, 6 months of birthday planning for what turned out to be a $50 Home Depot gift card. Real thoughtful. Next came the girls' nights. Shay's crew, Maria, Jessica, and Claire, used to meet maybe twice a month for wine and complaints about their husbands. Normal suburban mom stuff. Suddenly it's every weekend. And now they're too drunk to drive. So she's staying overnight at Maria's place. Every single weekend. You trust me, right? Became her favorite question. Of course I trust you. Good. Because I need this? Work's been really stressful lately. Work's been stressful. She works in marketing for a dental practice. Unless someone's having a root canal emergency, I'm pretty sure it's not that stressful. The credit card statements were what really got my attention. I handle our finances because I'm good with numbers, and Shay hates boring money stuff. Usually just scan through to make sure nothing's weird. That's when I started seeing charges that didn't make sense. Hotels downtown on nights she was supposedly at Maria's. Dinners for 2 at restaurants I'd never heard of. Shopping sprees that seemed excessive for book club gifts. The real kicker was the same hotel charge, Marriott downtown, every Saturday for 6 weeks straight. Either Maria moved into a hotel room, or my wife was lying through her teeth. Hey babe, what's this hotel charge? Thought you stayed at Maria's? She didn't even look up from her laptop. Maria's roommate situation got weird. Just easier to get a room. That's when I decided to have an adult conversation about what I was seeing. Sunday morning, she's drinking coffee in bed, scrolling through Instagram. Shay, can we talk about something? Sure, what's up? I've been noticing some stuff lately. The phone thing, all these overnight stays, charges I don't recognize. Immediate defensive mode. Are you seriously questioning me right now? I'm not questioning anything. I handle our money, remember? I see everything anyway. So what? You don't trust me now? I'm just saying things feel different. You're gone every weekend. Jesus Christ, she said, throwing off the covers. I can't have one night out with my friends without you turning it into some paranoid conspiracy. Every weekend isn't one night out, Shay. You know what? Maybe if you paid half as much attention to me as you do to those credit card statements, I wouldn't need girls' nights so much. Classic move. Make it my fault. I work my ass off for us. For this house, this life we built, and I'm supposed to just sit here and be grateful? Never have fun? Never go anywhere? That's not what I'm saying. That's exactly what you're saying. You want some 1950s housewife who just waits around for you to come home. She stormed out. Conversation over. But her reaction told me everything I needed to know. Innocent people don't get that defensive that fast. October and November, I started paying real attention. Taking mental notes, checking stories against receipts, looking for patterns. The patterns were obvious once I looked. Every Saturday hotel stay was followed by a Sunday where she'd come home late, shower immediately, then be extra nice. Coffee in bed, movie suggestions, sudden interest in my work schedule. When's your next big job? Became a regular question. Thanksgiving was the final straw. We're at her parents' house, same dining room table that would later become ground zero. I'm listening to Justin explain some crypto bullshit when his phone keeps buzzing. Every buzz, he glances toward the kitchen, where the women are cleaning up. Fourth buzz, he steps outside for a business call. 2 minutes later, Shay comes back looking flushed. Maria's having drama with her boyfriend. I should probably go help. I watched Justin through the window. He wasn't talking, he was texting. I'll drive you, I offered. No need. Stay for pie. I'll just take an Uber. An Uber. To help with relationship drama. At 3 p.m. on Thanksgiving. That night, I made a decision. Either I was losing my mind, or my wife was screwing her sister's husband. Time to find out which. I couldn't hire some $200 an hour private investigator. But I had something better. My buddy Silas, and absolutely zero moral restraint when it comes to cheating wives. Silas has been my best friend since trade school. Guy's got no filter, a pickup truck, and watches too much true crime TV. When I told him what I suspected, his response was peak Silas. No freaking way. Justin? That crypto bro douchebag? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Well, shit, man. Operation Catch a Cheater is officially active. We started simple. First Saturday, Silas and I grabbed coffee and drove by the Marriott around noon. Nothing suspicious. Second weekend, same thing. I was starting to think maybe I was being paranoid. Third weekend, jackpot. Silas brought donuts like we were cops on a stakeout. This feels very CSI, he said, adjusting his mirrors. Except we're catching adultery, not murder. 12:45 p.m. Justin's BMW pulls into the parking garage. My wife gets out of the passenger side wearing the black dress I bought her for our anniversary. They weren't even trying to hide it. Holy shit, Silas whispered. There's your smoking gun. Get pictures. Silas had borrowed a camera with a long lens from his cousin who does wedding photography. Started snapping away like TMZ. Got shots of them walking in together, his hand on her lower back, the way she laughed at something he said. They look real comfortable, Silas muttered. Too comfortable. We waited in the truck for 3 hours. Around 4 p.m., they came back to the parking garage. That's when we hit the lottery. These two idiots started making out against his car like teenagers. It was disgusting and perfect evidence all rolled into one. Jesus, Silas said, still taking pictures. Your wife's really going for it. Ex-wife, I corrected him. We followed this routine for 3 more weekends. Same pattern every time. Parking garage, hotel check-in, lunch at the bar, back to the room. They had it down to a science. But I wasn't satisfied with just photos. I remembered something. Years ago, Shay had set up a Gmail account for a work project. She'd forgotten about it, but it was still synced to our desktop in the spare room. I'd seen notifications pop up occasionally, but never paid attention. That Tuesday night, while Shay was at her book club, I fired up the computer. Bingo. Months of messages between a Gmail account I didn't recognize and Shay's old email. The Gmail was definitely Justin. Same pretentious writing style as his LinkedIn posts. They documented everything. And I mean everything. 8 months of affair planning, complaining about their spouses, describing their hotel adventures in detail I could have lived without. But it wasn't just sexting. They were planning their entire future together. December 10th. Justin. Saturday can't come soon enough. Got our usual room. Shay. Perfect. Told him I'm helping Maria with Christmas shopping. Justin. How much longer can we keep this up? Shay. Until we figure out the exit plan. December 15th. Shay. Think Sloane's getting suspicious? Justin. Nah, she's too busy with the kids and Christmas prep. We're good. Shay. I feel bad sometimes. Justin. Don't. We deserve happiness. They'll understand eventually. December 18th. Justin. Been thinking about timing. New Year's? Fresh start vibes. Shay. So cliché. What about after holidays? Less drama. Justin. Or Christmas dinner. Everyone together, rip the Band-Aid off. Shay. That's cruel. Justin. Sometimes cruel is honest. Quick and clean. They were planning to blow up both families at Christmas dinner. How festive. I spent the next days printing everything. Silas helped me organize it chronologically, building a timeline that showed exactly how their relationship developed. Screenshots, printed emails, backup copies on 3 different USB drives. The financial evidence was what really sealed their fate. Silas and I went through every credit card statement from the past 6 months. Every hotel charge, every dinner, every shopping spree that didn't come home to me. We built a spreadsheet showing $12,000 of our money spent on her affair. Look at this shit, Silas said, pointing at a Victoria's Secret charge. $300. When's the last time you saw her in new lingerie? I haven't. Right. She's buying screw-me outfits for her boyfriend with your credit card. We also discovered Justin's financial situation. Silas ran a background check and did some digging. Turns out this asshole was using company credit cards for personal expenses. Not just hotels with my wife, but groceries, gas, even his BMW payments. By December 20th, we had everything: photos, messages, financial records, timeline documentation, even evidence of Justin's embezzlement. Silas helped me organize it all into folders, ready for whatever came next. They documented their affair, their lies, their plans to humiliate me. All I had to do was let them hang themselves with their own rope. Time to start planning my response. Once I had the evidence, I had a choice. Go caveman. Kick down doors, throw punches, end up in county lockup. Very satisfying, completely stupid. Or I could be strategic. Use their arrogance against them. Let them think they were in control while I built the perfect trap. Guess which one I chose. First priority, protect my assets. Everything we'd built was about to become a war zone, and I wasn't letting this cheating bitch walk away with half my life's work. The house was priority number one. Our colonial that I'd bought with my money, my down payment, my mortgage payments. Legally, it was marital property, which meant she could claim half in divorce court. I called my buddy Tom, who handles real estate for contractors. I've done electrical work for him for years, wired his office building for basically cost. Tom, need some advice on asset protection. Heard you can do creative stuff with trusts. What kind of situation? The kind where I might need to keep what's mine actually mine. Ah, yeah, I can help. Tom explained I could set up a family trust with my sister as trustee. Completely legal, happens all the time for tax planning. Once assets were in the trust, they weren't marital property anymore. They belonged to the trust, not me personally. But here's the catch. I needed Shay's signature. How do I get her to sign without raising flags? Tell her it's for tax optimization. People will sign anything if they think it'll save money. So I told her it was for tax purposes, that we'd save thousands in property taxes if we restructured the ownership through a family trust. She signed without reading because she trusts me with the boring financial stuff. Next, I quietly started moving liquid assets. Opened accounts at different banks, ones she'd never heard of. Started transferring money in small amounts. $2,000 here, $3,500 there. Told her I was diversifying our emergency fund for better FDIC coverage. The cars were trickier. My work truck was already mine, but her Honda was joint. Tom helped me restructure that too. Created a loan where the trust loaned her money for the car, making her responsible for payments while the trust held the title. Why more paperwork for my car? Insurance restructuring. Our agent thinks we can save money if the vehicles are organized differently. Another signature without reading. Every document she signed, I was building a fortress around everything I'd earned. Because here's the thing about my state. It's a fault state, meaning courts consider who caused the divorce when dividing assets. Adultery plus theft of marital funds equals very bad news for the cheating spouse. I also restructured my business. Called my accountant, told him I wanted to change from sole proprietorship to LLC for liability protection. Created Elite Electrical Solutions LLC, with ownership structures that made my stake harder to calculate in divorce court. Updated all contracts, vendor relationships, business credit cards. If Shay wanted to go after my business, she'd have to untangle corporate structures that would cost more in legal fees than it was worth. The Justin situation needed a different approach. Silas's computer skills came in handy here. We spent hours researching his company, looking for weaknesses. Justin's startup was shakier than a house of cards. Funded by investors who'd put in about $1.5 million based on promises of revolutionary AI technology. But when Silas dug into their actual products, it was mostly smoke and mirrors, fancy presentations with no real tech behind them. More importantly, Justin had been systematically stealing company funds. We found evidence of personal charges going back over a year, grocery shopping, gas, car payments, even vacation rentals. This wasn't just hotel rooms with my wife. This was a pattern of embezzlement. Silas printed everything: bank statements, credit card records, expense reports. We organized it chronologically, showing how Justin's personal spending increased right when his affair with Shay started. This guy's looking at felony charges, Silas said, highlighting an expense report. Using corporate cards for personal stuff is textbook embezzlement. How much total? Close to $30,000 over 15 months. That's serious prison time. I also updated my estate planning. Changed beneficiaries on life insurance, updated my will, made sure if anything happened to me, Shay wouldn't see a penny. Everything would go to my sister, with instructions to fight any claims from my estranged wife. The psychological warfare was just as important. I had to play the loving husband while preparing for total war. Every morning, kiss goodbye. Every evening, ask about her day and listen to lies with a straight face. The hardest part was Christmas shopping. I had to buy gifts, wrap them, and act excited about our future, all while knowing that by New Year's, she'd be homeless. By Christmas Eve, I had everything ready. Silas helped me organize the final packages. For Shay, complete evidence file. Every photo, every message, every receipt, the full story of her affair, documented and indexed. For Justin, copies of his embezzlement evidence ready to mail to his boss, the district attorney, and the IRS. For Sloane, her own evidence folder showing exactly what her husband had been doing. For her parents, summary explaining how their daughter had been lying to everyone for 8 months. I also prepared backup plans. If Shay didn't serve papers at Christmas, I had my own divorce petition ready for December 26th. If she tried to claim abuse, I had documentation of her systematic deception. If Justin tried to destroy evidence, Silas had already sent anonymous tips to his company. Christmas morning felt like sitting on a bomb with a timer I couldn't see, walking into that house with wrapped presents, knowing I was about to orchestrate the most beautiful destruction in family history. Her dad was already working on his second drink, watching some meaningless bowl game. Her mom was in the kitchen, stress cooking like Christmas dinner was a competitive sport. Justin arrived with Sloane and their kids around 2 p.m., playing perfect family. Sloane was chasing their boys around, trying to keep them from breaking anything expensive. And Shay, my lying, cheating wife sitting across from me, fidgeting with her napkin like she was defusing a bomb, which in a way she was about to set off. Her parents kept making passive-aggressive comments about my work like they always did. Must be nice to finally take a day off, her mom said. Shay says you're always so busy. Business is good, I replied. Can't complain about steady work. Justin jumped in with his usual bullshit. That's the blue-collar trap, man. Always grinding, never living. Some of us work for what we have, I said, looking him dead in the eye. He shifted uncomfortably. Dinner was torture. Shay kept checking her phone like she was expecting an important call. Her mom was gossiping about neighbors nobody cared about. Her dad was explaining football rules to kids too young to understand. Around 4 p.m. after dessert, Shay finally stood up. Actually, she said, standing up with shaking hands, I have something I need to give everyone. The room went quiet. All eyes on her like she was about to announce a pregnancy. Her mom looked confused. Honey, we already did presents. This is different, Shay said, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a red envelope, hands visibly trembling, slid it across the table. What's this? I asked, playing dumb. Merry Christmas, Silas. She grinned. Her family was watching, sensing drama but not understanding what. I opened the envelope slowly, pulled out legal documents, read the header aloud. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Dead silence. Then her mom actually smiled. Oh, thank goodness, finally. That's when I realized this wasn't just Shay's plan. Her whole family had been waiting for this. They'd been expecting it, maybe even encouraging it. Her dad nodded like I'd just announced the weather. About time. Justin started grinning behind his drink. Sloane looked completely lost. Wait, what's happening? Shay's leaving him, her mom announced, like she was revealing Christmas morning surprises. That's when I started smiling. The whole situation was so perfectly screwed that it was almost beautiful. You should open your gift too. I pointed to the small wrapped box under the tree that I'd placed there that morning. Her confidence was evaporating. This wasn't in her script. Her family looked confused because why would I bring a gift if I knew about divorce papers? She walked to the tree on unsteady legs, picked up the box, came back to the table, opened it with trembling hands. The color drained from her face completely. Inside were printed photos. Her and Justin making out in parking garages, walking into hotels hand in hand, him groping her against his car. Under the photos were USB drives labeled text messages, financial records, and hotel receipts. Her mom dropped her glass. It shattered. Her dad started choking on his drink. Justin went white as fresh snow. Sloane looked at the photos, then at her husband, then back at the photos. What the hell is this? Time for my Oscar moment. Well, I said, addressing the room like I was giving a presentation. Since we're doing family announcements, figured you should all know that your daughter's been screwing her sister's husband for 8 months. Instant chaos. Her mom started hyperventilating. Her dad started swearing. Sloane grabbed the photos and started flipping through them, her face getting redder with each image. That she's been using our credit cards to pay for hotel rooms where they play house. Justin tried to interrupt. Look, this isn't... And that your son-in-law here, I continued, pointing at Justin, has been using his company's credit cards to fund the whole operation. which, fun fact, is felony embezzlement. Sloane started screaming at Justin. The kids started crying because mommy was yelling. Her parents looked like they'd aged a decade in 30 seconds. I already sent copies to his boss and the district attorney, I added. Merry Christmas, asshole. Justin looked like he was about to throw up. But wait, there's more, I said, turning back to Shay. Remember those boring tax documents you signed? Turns out you don't own the house anymore. Or the cars. Or basically anything, actually. Funny how trust documents work when you don't read them. That's when Shay found her voice. You can't do this. Those signatures. That's fraud. You tricked me. Actually, it's not. Everything was legal and properly disclosed. You signed papers transferring assets to a family trust for tax optimization. Your lawyer can explain how trusts work. I'll fight this. I'll take you for everything. With what money? You maxed out credit cards on hotel rooms. You're about to be unemployed when your company finds out. And you owe me restitution for the $12,000 you stole from our marriage. The room erupted in shouting. Sloane screaming at Justin, him trying to explain, her parents yelling at Shay, kids crying louder. I grabbed my coat and headed for the door. Where are you going? Shay shouted. Home? Well, my home. You'll need to figure out somewhere else to stay. And I walked out, leaving behind the most beautiful chaos I'd ever created. Sat in my truck for a minute, listening to the screaming through the windows, and started laughing. 8 months of planning, and it couldn't have gone better. My phone started buzzing before I hit the street. The first week after nuclear Christmas was like watching a controlled demolition in slow motion. I'm holed up at my sister's place with a drink, monitoring the destruction from a safe distance. Let me walk you through the beautiful carnage, because this shit is more entertaining than anything on TV. The legal destruction. Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp, I filed my counter petition. Adultery with photographic evidence, dissipation of marital assets with financial proof, the whole arsenal. My lawyer said it was the most airtight adultery case he'd seen in 20 years. Shay hired some downtown firm, probably with money she borrowed from her parents. They tried claiming she was seeking personal fulfillment in an emotionally distant marriage, and that I was being vindictively punitive. Good luck selling that story when you've got photos of their client with her tongue down her brother-in-law's throat. The judge was not impressed, especially when we presented financial evidence showing $12,000 of marital funds spent on her affair. In our state, that's not just cheating, that's theft. The house? Untouchable in the family trust. Cars? Same deal. Bank accounts? What bank accounts? As far as the court knows, I'm just a heartbroken electrician whose cheating wife cleaned him out. Her lawyer tried challenging the asset transfers, claiming I'd hidden marital property. But every signature was legitimate, every document properly notarized, and Shay signed everything willingly. Hard to claim fraud when your client enthusiastically signed papers to save on taxes. Justin's professional bomb. The embezzlement evidence hit like a guided missile. Monday afternoon, Justin got called into his boss's office. By 4 p.m., he was walking out with a cardboard box and unemployment papers. But it gets better. His company didn't just fire him. They terminated him for cause, which means no severance, no benefits, no health insurance. They're also pursuing criminal charges for $28,000 in fraudulent expenses over 14 months. The DA's office practically salivated over the case. Corporate credit card fraud is prosecutors' candy, especially when those expenses include affair hotels. His equity in the company? Gone. Stock options? Forfeited. That IPO he was always bragging about? Moving forward without him, and his former partners are making sure everyone knows why. But here's the cherry on top. His company's suing him personally for reimbursement. That means they're coming after his house, his car, anything not nailed down. Sloane's revenge tour. Sloane turned out to be the MVP of this whole disaster. Christmas night, while Justin was trying to explain away photos of him groping her sister, Sloane was already on the phone with a divorce attorney. Filed papers Tuesday morning with a strategy that was pure genius. Full custody, maximum alimony, half of everything, plus emotional distress damages for adultery. But Sloane didn't stop there. She went full scorched earth on Justin's reputation, posted a carefully worded Facebook announcement about discovering my husband's affair that got shared 2,000 times in 48 hours. Sent evidence to his parents, his friends, his college buddies. The man's social life is officially dead. Sloane also got smart about money. Before Justin knew what hit him, she'd frozen joint accounts, canceled his credit cards, filed for emergency support. By Tuesday, he couldn't buy lunch without borrowing money. Shay's parents are in full crisis mode. Her mom's been calling me nonstop, alternating between begging and threatening. Please think about the family, she said in one voicemail. Mistakes were made, but this doesn't have to destroy everyone. Mistakes were made. Like their daughter accidentally tripped and landed on her brother-in-law's dick for 8 months. Her dad showed up at my shop Tuesday, wanting to work this out man to man. Told him the only conversation I wanted involved his daughter paying back what she stole. She's still my daughter, he said. And she's still a thief and a cheater, I replied. Shay's spectacular fall. This is where it gets really satisfying. That confidence she had sliding divorce papers across the table? Completely gone. She's back in her childhood bedroom because she literally has nowhere else to go. Can't afford an apartment because all our money is in accounts she can't access. Can't get credit because her income was tied to our joint finances. Her job situation is even worse. Her marketing firm has a conduct clause in employment contracts. When word got out about the affair drama, her boss called her in for a discussion. We handle reputation management, her boss allegedly said. Hard to manage other people's reputations when you can't manage your own. She's on administrative leave while they evaluate the situation. Translation: they're figuring out how to fire her without a lawsuit. The social isolation is brutal. Her friends group imploded. Even Maria and Jessica got tired of the drama and constant money requests. She's basically a ghost in her own hometown. My business boom. Ironically, this whole clusterfuck has been great for Elite Electrical. Word travels fast in contractor circles, and apparently being the wronged party in a cheating scandal is excellent marketing. Every electrician, plumber, and contractor in town knows the story. They're all sending referrals. Support the guy who handled his business right, seems to be the general sentiment. I've booked more work in a week than I usually get in a month. My phone's been a battlefield. In 48 hours, I got 47 missed calls from Shay, 23 text messages ranging from begging to threatening, 12 voicemails cycling through denial, anger, bargaining, and depression, calls from her parents, mutual friends, and Justin. The evolution of Shay's messages has been fascinating. Started with denial. This is all a misunderstanding. Moved to anger. You're a vindictive asshole. Then bargaining. We can work through this. And finally acceptance. Radio silence since Thursday. What's next? Divorce proceedings will take months, but the outcome's predetermined. I've got evidence, protected assets, and moral high ground. Shay's got debt, unemployment, and a family ashamed of her. Justin's looking at 12 to 18 months in county jail if convicted, which seems likely. His civil cases will drain whatever assets prison doesn't cost him. Sloane's talking about moving back to her hometown with the kids. Fresh start, away from the chaos. And me? I'm focusing on the business. Maybe hiring more guys. The funniest part is how easily this could have been avoided. If Shay wanted out, she could have asked for divorce honestly and walked away with dignity and half our assets. Instead, she got greedy, got stupid, and got obliterated. She wanted to embarrass me in front of her family. Instead, she made herself the family disappointment for generations. Sometimes karma needs assistance. Sometimes you have to be your own justice. And sometimes, if you're patient and methodical enough, you can turn other people's worst decisions into your greatest victory. 4 months later, the dust has settled, and let me tell you, justice tastes better than Christmas dinner. The divorce finalization. Got the final decree 2 weeks ago. Everything went exactly as planned. She got exactly what she earned. Nothing. Final settlement. I keep the house, the business, all trust assets. Plus she owes me $24,000 in restitution for stolen marital funds. Original $12,000 plus damages. Her lawyer tried one last desperate move, claiming financial hardship, but Judge Morrison wasn't interested. Actions have consequences, counselor. Your client understood this when she chose to fund her affair with marital assets, he said. Guy's been on the bench for 15 years and has zero patience for cheating spouses. Shay's total legal fees, $31,000. Money she doesn't have for a case she never could have won. Her parents had to take a second mortgage to pay her lawyer. Justin's complete annihilation. Remember our boy Justin? Life's been real interesting for him. He pled guilty to embezzlement in February. Got 14 months in county plus 3 years probation. Could have been worse, but his lawyer negotiated down by claiming emotional distress from divorce proceedings. The civil cases were more brutal. His former company got a $67,000 judgment, original theft plus interest and legal fees. They seized his house, his car, his bank accounts, even his golf clubs. Man's got nothing but the orange jumpsuit they issued in lockup. Sloane's divorce went through in January. She got full custody, the remaining house equity, and alimony payments Justin will be making from prison wages. 17 cents an hour doesn't go far, but every penny counts. Best part? Justin's startup folded after his arrest. Turns out when your CFO gets busted for embezzlement, investors lose confidence fast. All those grandiose plans for revolutionary AI died with his criminal record. Shay's rock bottom. But Shay's story is the real masterpiece. Lost her job officially in January when the firm's evaluation concluded she was no longer suitable for client-facing roles. She's been living with her parents for 4 months, sleeping in her teenage bedroom with the same boy band posters from high school. Her mom complains constantly, according to neighborhood gossip that gets back to me through Silas's drinking buddies. Tried getting work at marketing firms around town. Word travels fast in professional circles, especially when your personal drama involves criminal charges. Nobody wants to hire the woman who funded an affair with embezzled money. She's currently part-time at Target, making $13 an hour. The same store where she used to drop hundreds of outfits for her affair dates. Irony so thick you could cut it with a knife. The final encounter happened last Friday. I'm at Home Depot grabbing supplies when guess who's working customer service? Shay. In a red vest, looking like she hasn't slept in weeks. She saw me before I saw her. When I walked to the electrical section, she was waiting. "Can we talk?" she asked, glancing around like she was embarrassed to be seen. "We're talking now," I said, not stopping to browse wire nuts. "I mean really talk. About us." I stopped and looked at her. Really looked. 4 months of consequences had not been kind. She looked exhausted, defeated, like someone who'd finally realized how badly she'd screwed up. "What about us? Last I checked, you served me divorce papers and tried to humiliate me. I made mistakes. You made choices," I corrected. "Big difference. I've been thinking about what we had, what we could have again." That's when I started laughing. "You for real? After you screwed your sister's husband for 8 months? After you stole from our marriage? After you tried to destroy me in front of your family? People change. I've learned," oh, what have you learned? "That I had a good life and threw it away for nothing." She looked down at her red vest, at the customers walking past us, at the life she'd built through pure stupidity. "I know I don't deserve another chance." "You're right. You don't. We were good together once. Past tense. I can make this right." "With what? You're working retail for $13 an hour. You owe me $24,000. What exactly are you going to make right?" The hope in her eyes died right there. "So that's it? You won't even consider?" "Lady, I wouldn't take you back if you were the last woman on earth. You're a liar, a cheat, and a thief. Those aren't mistakes. Those are character traits." I grabbed my supplies and headed for the checkout. "You used to love me," she called after me. I stopped and turned around one last time. "I used to love who I thought you were." Got a text from her new number that night. "I'm sorry for everything. I hope you can forgive me someday." I deleted it and blocked her without responding. Some mistakes can't be forgiven. Some bridges can't be rebuilt. Shay made her choices. Now she lives with those choices forever. Game over. I won.